Chapter 593. Sister, sister, the emperor is dead. In a Taoist temple, a 16 or 17-year-old Taoist nun jumped into the room and shouted. In the room there was a woman dressed in Taoist robes. She looked like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world and was practicing calligraphy. Her gaze froze when she heard the shout. Such a big thing actually happened. The woman in the room muttered to herself and gently put the brush aside. Guess how he died? The young girl asked with a wink. Since you are asking this, something must have happened. I can't guess. Tell me. The woman smiled and the room suddenly became much warmer. You are so boring. The young girl pouted and then exclaimed in disbelief. He died from the stench. Stench. The woman in the room was shocked to hear this answer. Such a way of dying could be considered as shocking. Guess who did it? The young girl asked mischievously. I can't. The woman still smiled and shook her head. You have seen it before. The woman looked at her gently and didn't say a word. After a minute or two, the young girl couldn't hold on anymore and said dejectedly, Forget it, I will tell you. It was Cheesy Xiao's gigolo. The woman opened her mouth slightly and revealed a surprised expression. Her thoughts immediately drifted to the man and woman she had met in the mountains last year, a little later than today. This woman was naturally Li Yuanzhu, and the young girl was Ning Qing. Ning Qing had grown taller over the past year, and the baby fat on her face had lessened. She looked much more mature than she was a year ago. I knew that guy wasn't a good person when I saw him last year, but I didn't expect him to do such an evil thing. I will teach him a lesson when I see him again. Ning Qing was furious at the thought of Ren Baqian. She looked down and realized that her breasts had grown a lot over the past year. Li Yuanzhu couldn't help but laugh at her reaction. However, that man was really hard to evaluate. No one had ever spoken to her like that in her entire life. Ren Baqian's words, her breasts are bigger than yours, left a deep impression on both of them. What exactly happened? Li Yuanzhu asked after some thought. I heard that the palace was suddenly covered with a stench, and the old emperor died from it. I wonder what kind of stench could kill the old emperor. Ning Qing asked curiously. Just as the empress had said, Ren Baqian had indeed become famous. Moreover, it was a very famous one. That day, hundreds of stink bombs exploded within the imperial palace, virtually covering the entire imperial palace. The Xia emperor immediately passed out from suffocation. No one could live in the palace anymore. Almost all the concubines had moved out as if they were fleeing for their lives. Only a few eunuchs and guards were left in the palace. They felt like they were going to die at any moment. At the same time they stuck to their posts, cleaning up the palace. It wasn't until 7 days later that the smell of the palace began to lessen. As for the Xia emperor, he had been in poor health for the past half year, and now that he had been tortured like this, he died within 2 days. Naturally, the morning letter that was sent out to the public could not say that Emperor Xia had died from the stench. If that was the case, everyone in the world would laugh their heads off. It could also not say that he had died from a serious illness, as such a major event in the royal palace could not be kept a secret. In the end, all the civil and military officials of the court came together and announced that Emperor Xia had been secretly poisoned to death. At the same time, Great Xia was also preparing to use this opportunity to divert the conflict within the country and divert the attention of the people to the murderer who poisoned Emperor Xia. They wanted to use this opportunity to win a breather. However, early the next morning, countless flyers were pasted all over the imperial capital. Ren Baqian the murderer. These words were naturally written by Su Qing. He pondered for a long time. Ren Baqian the one who released the poisonous gas bomb, Ren Baqian the one who killed Emperor Xia with the stench. No matter which one sounded awkward, and he was afraid that Ren Baqian would find trouble with him. After experiencing this incident, he was afraid that Ren Baqian would find an opportunity to take revenge on him. In the end, he simply used the words Ren Baqian the murderer. At first, the people of Great Xia were puzzled as to who Ren Baqian was. Then, they remembered that gigolo Qi Xiao who had poisoned tens of thousands of people to death. Coupled with the fact that the aboriginals had flaunted their prowess in Great Xia, the people were immediately agitated. In particular, with the secret efforts of some people, almost all of the people's spearheads were pointed at Dayo. One had to know that the emperor of Great Xia had actually been poisoned to death. How humiliating was this? If they didn't take revenge, what face would the imperial court have? This time, it was the imperial court's turn to feel numb. This was because they knew that this was really done by Ren Baqian. Even if Ren Baqian was in Dayo, and even if the aboriginals didn't have the strength to send so many things into the palace of Great Xia. However, the cylinders that remained in the palace indicated the identity of the owner of this object. It had to be Rinpoche. Although this exquisite object was different from the small melons that could explode on the battlefield, it had the same style. However, what the imperial court of Great Xia wanted to do now was to recuperate and not roll up their sleeves and start a life-and-death battle with the aboriginals. However, the current attitude of the people was also a form of pressure to them. At the same time, this incident had indeed enraged the imperial court. The attitude of the military generals was almost the same as that of the people. In addition, there was the crown prince of Great Xia. He still had a bunch of brothers who were eyeing him covetously. If the first thing he did after ascending to the throne wasn't to avenge Emperor Xia, the reaction of all parties could be imagined. Therefore, after a short period of chaos for various reasons, Great Xia, whether they were willing or not, had a unified attitude. This revenge had to be taken. At the same time, the entire Great Xia began to move. Orders to recruit soldiers, increase taxes, and collect food were quickly passed down. At the same time, there were too many people who knew about this matter. After all, there were too many people in the palace and nearly 1 million people in the capital. The true cause of Emperor Xia's death was also spread in the ears of some people, especially those who were well informed. Rinpoche also had a new nickname among some people, Stinky Emperor. On one hand, it was because Rinpoche had really killed an emperor with his stench. On the other hand, it was because of the power of the stench in the palace this time. Su Qing happily sent Rinpoche's new nickname to him in a secret letter. When Rinpoche received the letter, his face turned black. This wasn't even as good as the poison warrior from before. On the other hand, the Empress laughed heartily for a long time. This matter was really fun. In addition, the fact that Xia Baichong had died from the stench was also worthy of her happiness. She immediately sent an order to the court officials to hold a banquet in the palace that night to celebrate. Subsequently, the news that Xia Baichong had died from the stench spread along with the Empress's order. Many people laughed until their mouths twitched. The fact that the Emperor of Great Xia had died from the stench was simply the biggest joke in the world. Stinky Emperor, how exactly did you stink Xia Baichong to death? During the banquet, Tong Jingye came to Rinpoche's side with a face full of gossip. You want to know? Rinpoche's face turned black as he looked at him maliciously. I really want to know. Tong Jingye touched his beard, unable to suppress his exuberant curiosity. When Rinpoche saw that the others were also looking at him with a face full of gossip, he really had the urge to throw a skunk bomb at the banquet. However, after thinking about it, he would be beaten to death by the Empress. Then he gloomily said, "Wait for me outside the city tomorrow. If anyone else wants to know, you can come along. I will show you." Tong Jingye looked at Rinpoche for a long time before saying, "You are trying to trick me." Rinpoche cursed in his heart. This old fox wasn't like an aboriginal at all. However, I still can't suppress my curiosity. Tomorrow I will wait for you outside the city, Stinky Emperor. Tong Jingye hesitated for a while but still said resolutely. He really wanted to know what kind of stench could kill Emperor Xia. Wasn't it just a stench? Could it even kill a Cardinal Heaven expert like him? Chapter 594. The next day after class, Rinpoche put 2 skunk bombs in his bag and rushed out of the city with his guards. When he arrived outside the city, he saw that there were quite a lot of people. Dozens of burly men with bald or braided hair and arms big enough to race horses stood there. Dayo's officials were really idle. Tong Jingye and Qin Xuan were staring at each other. They were surrounded by officials from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of War, as well as 2 assistant ministers. They were all laughing and joking around. Not far away stood Minister Shen Hua of the Ministry of Rights, Minister Zhu Yan of the Ministry of Justice, Minister Xiong Yaohe of the Ministry of Personnel, as well as officials from the Taichung Bureau, the Honglu Bureau, the Public Order Bureau, the Inspection Bureau, the Imperial Court, the Seal Bureau, the Meritorious Department, and the Examination Bureau. Other than the Great Elder, the Junior Elder, and the people from the Ministry of Revenue, almost everyone was present. Rinpoche reckoned that if this skunk bomb was thrown, all the higher-ups of Dayo would be wiped out. He originally thought that Tong Jingye brought a few small fries with him, but he didn't expect so many people to come. It would be easier to understand if Qin Xuan was here. However, weren't the curiosity of the others a little too exuberant? It could only be said that the aboriginals didn't have a lot of people. Sir Rin is here. Feng Ho laughed when he saw Rinpoche coming from afar and appeared in front of him in a few flashes. Why are there so many people? Rinpoche felt a little dizzy. Think about it. If a skunk bomb wiped out all the higher-ups of Dayo, how would they look at him in the future? Sir Tong and Sir Qin are making a bet on who can withstand Sir Ren's stench. After the news spread, The other officials were also curious about how Sir Ren managed to sting Xia Baichong to death. Feng Ho grinned with a ferocious face. Ren Baqian pondered for a while and felt that there was something wrong with these words. What did he mean by my stench? He made it sound as if he smelled bad. He glanced at Feng Ho, then at the crowd and asked, how did Minister Tong and Minister Qin make the bet? Whoever can't stand it has to stay away from the other party for a month. Feng Ho said. Ren Baqian's face was full of vigor. These two were really brave warriors. If a person smelled this odor, they would definitely run away. But if the two of them were to make a bet, whoever ran away first would be the loser. The consequences would be too horrible to look at. Sir Ren, we have been waiting for a long time. Let me experience your stench. Tong Jingye turned his head and laughed at Ren Baqian. Principal Ren, we have been waiting for a long time. Everyone cupped their hands. I finally grasped this opportunity today. In the future, old man, when you see me, you'll have to stay far away from me. Qin Chuan sneered. Who are you calling old man? Tong Jingye turned his head and asked Qin Chuan in disdain. The old man is calling you. Qin Chuan was the kind of person who had fallen into the same pit countless times. Ren Baqian smiled and returned the salute as he walked into the crowd. He took out 2 skunk bombs from the back of his waist and gestured, pull these open and throw them at your feet. It won't explode, right? Tong Jingye asked suspiciously. Whenever he saw this thing, he felt like it was going to explode. This is not a bomb, how is that possible? Besides, even if it explodes, it won't be a big deal to all of you. As he spoke, he handed the things to the two of them, one in each hand. He cupped his hands and said, everyone, please carry on with your work. I still have to go back and see Her Majesty. After he finished speaking, he turned and ran away as if he was being chased by a dog. He was afraid that someone might throw him at the spot where the skunk bomb was to get back at him. He didn't want to experience the smell a second time after smelling it once. So it's like this. Pull this away, right? Tong Jingye fiddled with the skunk bomb, pulled the ring off and threw it at his feet. Qin Chuan did the same and the two of them stared at each other. In less than 5 seconds, an extremely strong and suffocating smell pervaded the air. The surrounding people immediately burst into an uproar and ran away. It was as if a bomb had exploded, and dozens of people immediately ran in all directions. They vomited as they ran, and their faces looked as if they had eaten feces. Sure enough, a stench that could kill Xia Baichong wasn't easy to deal with. Only Qin Chuan and Tong Jingye were left standing there with their faces turning green. They stared at each other, smelled the suffocating stench, and felt as if countless sledgehammers were hitting their heads. They were seeing stars and they couldn't help but feel snot and tears flowing down their cheeks. Sure enough, it's a stench that could kill Xia Baichong. Look. Tong Jingye's face looked as if his crotch had been kicked dozens of times. His face turned green for a while, but he had to hold on and not run. Just now, he almost ran away, but when he subconsciously took a step, he remembered the bet and froze in place. Losing wasn't scary, but losing to an old enemy in front of him was unacceptable. You can't hold on anymore, right? If you can't hold on, get lost. Just stay away from me in the future. Qin Chuan's face was similar to Tong Jingye's as he gritted his teeth and held on. I'm fine, but you are an old bag of bones. If you can't hold on, don't force yourself and end up like Xia Baichong. Tong Jingye's eyes were wide open as he squeezed his words out from the gaps between his teeth. Sir Ren's stench is extraordinary. If you can't hold on, just ask for mercy. I don't need you to stay away from me. Qin Chuan stared at Tong Jingye with his eyes wide open. Ha, old man, how can I, Tong Jingye, stand this little stench? If you can't hold on, just leave and I'll let you go. I don't need you to stay away from me. Tong Jingye wanted to let out a heroic laugh, but he almost vomited the moment he opened his mouth. In the end, he could only force out a dry smile. Seeing that they couldn't convince each other, the two of them stared at each other while enduring the stench that was beyond their limits. Old bastard, you actually want to drag me with you even if you die. I definitely won't let you off, Tong Jingye cursed in his heart. He felt that his tears were about to flow out. Old man, you're actually still holding on. I don't believe that you can hold on. Qin Chuan thought to himself. The two of them stared at each other with their eyes wide open. The 2 iron cylinders under their feet were still emitting that stench, making the surrounding stench even more intense. Ha, do you dare to take a deep breath? Tong Jingye suddenly realized that Qin Chuan's chest wasn't moving at all and immediately laughed out loud. Why wouldn't I dare? Qin Chuan said as he took a deep breath. His stomach churned and he almost vomited his breakfast. However, he forcefully swallowed it back down. The taste of stomach acid was still coming out from the gaps between his teeth. He said in a sinister tone, "Old man, do you dare to take a deep breath?" The others had already escaped far away. However, even though they were far away, they could still smell the stench on their bodies. It was as if the stench was like maggots in one's bones. They turned their heads to look at Qin Chuan and Tong Jinye, who were still standing in their original spots. They couldn't help but admire them. "These two sirs are extraordinary." After saying this, they ran back home to take a shower. Rinpoche ran all the way back to the top of the city wall and looked into the distance. He saw that the two figures were still standing there motionlessly. Rinpoche admired them and said, "These two are really brave warriors." Bathing in the so-called hot feces pit wasn't necessarily comparable to the courage of these two people outside the city. At least he couldn't do it. However, he didn't know how long it would take for the stench to wash off their bodies if they just stood there like that. It was better to quickly inform the Empress and give them a day off. Chapter 595. The Empress ordered Tong Jinye and Qin Chuan not to attend morning court for 10 days after they heard each other. It was said that the two of them shut themselves in the residence after returning. There was no other way. No matter where they went, there was a fragrant wind. On the way back, the commoners looked at them as if they had seen ghosts. Wherever the two of them appeared, people would scatter. For the next few days, the two residences would occasionally be heard shouting, "Tong Jinye, you old man, I'll definitely teach you a lesson." Or, "Qin Chuan, you old man, I'll definitely teach you a lesson." Although the two of them shut themselves in the residence, they would occasionally walk around the residence. The end result was that the entire Qin residence and the Tong residence were filled with the smell. For the next period of time, Tong Lan would grind her canine teeth every time she saw Rinpoche at school and wanted to bite him. Finally, one day Rinpoche appeared at the training ground in the palace with a sullen face. The Empress had already strictly ordered him to practice martial arts diligently. The reason was that Great Xia would definitely send people to assassinate him just like the previous few times since he had poisoned them. Although there were very few foreigners in Lan City, there were still some shopkeepers from the big clans who were on standby. With the addition of the Jing tribe, there was still a possibility of Great Xia people sneaking in. Rinpoche looked at Tong Lan with an embarrassed look on his face. He felt that the Empress's words just now were all nonsense. No matter how much he practiced, it would be useless if he encountered a spirit wheel expert. He could only rely on his bodyguards to buy time and escape back to Earth. If he encountered an expert below the spirit wheel level, he wouldn't be able to get past his bodyguards. However, the Empress was the most powerful person in the world. In the end, he still stood here. On the other hand, the little Lolita was excited. The Tong residence had been tossed around miserably these days, and now she could finally take revenge. "Yagwe, you said it yourself. You are the teacher at the school, so beating you up during practice isn't considered deceiving your teacher," the little Lolita said seriously as she clenched her fists. Rinpoche was flabbergasted and asked, "How is that possible? Your teacher will always be your teacher, and your grandfather will always be your grandfather. If you beat me up, you will be deceiving your teacher. I will look for your grandfather and have a good chat with him later." "He's at home. Go and look for him." Tong Lan sneered and then looked at the Empress. "Don't worry about his identity." At the side, the Empress was wearing sunglasses and lying on a recliner. Qin Yuan and Hong Yuan were holding a huge imperial canopy for her to use as a parasol. There were fruits and wine on the small round table beside her. If she were to change into a bikini, she would look like she was basking in the sun. Upon hearing the Empress's order, Tong Lan grinned at him, revealing her two small canine teeth. In a flash, she appeared above his head and rained down a pair of small fists. Rinpoche narrowed his eyes and retreated a few meters. Could this stance be the legendary long-lost Pegasus Meteor Fist? I didn't expect this move to be used by your Tong clan. Tong Lan's imposing manner was suddenly stifled. She somersaulted in the air and landed on the ground. What is the Pegasus Meteor Fist? Then Rinpoche's vision darkened. He took large strides forward and executed the extremely vicious move of the Fist of Death, the heart-killing blade. Using one hand as a blade, he channeled all his strength into his arm and stabbed it toward Tong Lan. At this moment, when Rinpoche executed the heart-killing blade, the muscles on his arm bulged. His veins were like dragons winding around his arm. When he struck with his hand, there was a strong piercing sound as if the air was being sliced apart. The Empress nodded her head slightly. This move of Rinpoche's was somewhat skillful, but it was still too inexperienced and not fast enough. Tong Lan leaped up slightly and stepped on Rinpoche's arm. Rinpoche felt a strong force pressing down on his arm. A gust of wind assaulted his face as Tong Lan kicked him. The next move of the heart-killing blade was either the ripper hand or the throat-ripping hand. After all, the fist of death was a fist technique used to kill enemies in the army. With Tong Lan's foot on Rinpoche's arm, he couldn't execute any of the moves he wanted to execute. If it was in the past, this kick from Tong Lan would basically end the battle. After all, regardless of strength or speed, Tong Lan had the absolute advantage. Unexpectedly, it was as if Rinpoche had already guessed this move. He immediately lay down, supported himself with both hands on the ground, and unexpectedly twisted his body. His waist was twisted at a 90-degree angle and both his legs were wrapped around Tong Lan's waist. It would have been fine if a woman used this move, but Rinpoche's current body weight was 120 kilograms. It was considered difficult for him to execute this move. This move was the simplest form of the hunter technique that the Empress had taught him, the ground entanglement. It was used when he learned the entanglement of pythons, to wrap around a person's waist, neck or jaw. However, he executed this move at this moment. Even though Tong Lan was a little surprised, she still twisted her body in midair. Her body was almost touching Rinpoche's legs as she twisted her body. Then she grabbed both of his legs with each hand and threw him out, creating a human-sized pit on the ground. Rinpoche was dizzy from the fall. He stood up and shook his head. Then he looked at Tong Lan with a dazed expression and said, "Your pants fell off. Do you think I will believe you? This move is outdated." Tong Lan wrinkled her nose and snorted. Then she felt a chill on both her legs. Rinpoche looked on helplessly as Tong Lan's pants fell off, revealing a small pair of flat pants. It was the kind that Lin Xiaola always wore and had a similar function as safety pants. After all, when the women in this world fought with others, they would raise their legs a lot and even jump to high places. If they didn't wear it like in ancient China, they would have long been exposed. Rinpoche subconsciously turned his head and looked at the Empress. He saw her holding a wine glass in one hand and looking at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Rinpoche's face also turned red. After all, it wasn't very honorable to use this move on a 10-year-old Lolita. "Ah! I will fight it out with you." Tong Lan screamed as if she was being molested. Her face was as red as blood. An hour later, Tong Lan left in a huff. Rinpoche's eye sockets were like those of a panda. Even though he still had panda eyes, there was still a huge improvement this time. At least, alright, even though he didn't injure Tong Lan, he had injured her belt. Even if she was careless, this was still a huge improvement. "Your ground entanglement is pretty good. How about the other moves?" The Empress laughed. "I still can't do it all. Many of the moves simply challenge the limits of humans." Rinpoche was also helpless. There were a total of 13 moves in the hunter technique, and he could only use 2 of them. There were still 5 moves that he could barely perform, and he couldn't even perform the rest of the moves. This set of moves is only effective on humans. However, you aren't in the mountains now and you don't have to face ferocious beasts. If you master this set of hunter technique, you will more or less have the ability to protect yourself, the Empress said faintly. The next day when Rinpoche went to class, Tong Lan saw that he was still panting with anger. Even though she was only a 10-year-old girl, the extraordinary humiliation of her pants falling off was enough for her to remember for the rest of her life. Moreover, she was wearing a pair of striped underpants and it was actually seen by others. This was simply a lifetime of humiliation. Rinpoche didn't really care. In any case, Tong Lan was panting with anger most of the time. After half a month, this group of students had made some progress with their steam train. At the very least, they had changed the single flywheel at the front into 2 large double flywheels. At the back, there was a row of wheels that gradually became smaller. The outside was wrapped with animal tendons and all the wheels were connected together. It was just like the tracks of a tank. At the same time, the connecting rods were all changed to the inside of the train. This was because they had consulted a few carpenters to make such rapid progress. However, they were merely consulting and Rinpoche had personally seen them make these things. Therefore, Rinpoche didn't mind. After all, he couldn't ask this group of students to understand blacksmithing and carpentry. Even though there were pointers from the carpenters, most of it was their own effort. Chapter 596. In the following days, Rinpoche students were stuck in a situation where the locomotive was too heavy and the steam engine couldn't move it. Furthermore, the steam engine was too big and the structure couldn't support it. Between these two situations, the size of the locomotive started to increase. Half a month later, seeing that the locomotive was half the size of a courtyard, Rinpoche finally couldn't help but ask, Can't you bunch of idiots change the structure to iron? Iron is too expensive. We can't afford it. Tong Lan raised her small face and said confidently. Everyone nodded their heads. Rinpoche was so angry that he almost laughed. A bunch of officials' children. Well, even though they were good-for-nothings among the officials' children, they still had a lot of pocket money, right? With so many people pooling together, they shouldn't be unable to afford iron, right? However, their expressions didn't seem to be fake. Rinpoche recalled that he hadn't been paying much attention to the current situation of Daeyo's iron production, so he didn't say anything more. However, he had recently discovered some interesting phenomena. In the past it was fine, but ever since the steam engine was made, these students gradually divided into 3 levels. The first level consisted of Tong Lan and Shurgan, who were the strongest. At this moment it could be seen from their bodies that the rest of the students were more or less dirty, but they were relatively clean. However, the cleanliness of the 2 of them was different. Tong Lan's entire body was clean and refreshing. She was dressed in white, which was completely out of place in the messy surroundings. As for Shurgan, even though his chest and sleeves looked a little dirty, one could tell from his hands that they were clean without any traces of work. However, he made his clothes a little dirty so that he didn't look so special. It could only be said that he was indeed the son of the great elder. He was on a completely different level from Tong Lan, who was a silly girl with a brain full of muscles. These 2 people were mainly responsible for talking and giving advice. Among them, Shurgan had put forward many useful suggestions. As for Tong Lan, she was only used as a talker and a mascot. Even though Tong Lan seemed to have done a lot of things recently, these were all because of differences in ideology, such as fighting with Shurgan and coming up with bad ideas. The second level consisted of a small number of people who were stronger, did less work, and mainly did odd jobs and came up with ideas. Unexpectedly, this group of people was made up of commoner students. These people were relatively hard-working, and their individual strengths were pretty good. After entering Rinpoche's school by chance, their performance was generally pretty good. The last group was led by Du Laolu and the rest, who were good-for-nothings from the various clans. All of them were dirty and had been reduced to coolies. The Aboriginals' respect for martial prowess and the law of the jungle was clearly displayed here. However, Rinpoche felt that this kind of division wasn't too bad. At the very least, it was much better than having the coolies be the children of commoners. The ethos of Daeyo was still relatively simple. After class he went to the Ministry of Works to ask about it. After asking around he found out that the students really couldn't afford it. It wasn't fake, it was real. Even though the mining of the Daemo iron mine in Daeyo had been going very smoothly for the past 6 months, causing Daeyo's iron production to soar, the price of the iron mine hadn't dropped by much. Daeyo's demand for iron was simply too high. Even though Mount Daemo had produced quite a lot of iron ore, it still had to satisfy the needs of the army. During the war, the consumption of weapons had always been very fast. Moreover, the militia also needed a large amount of weapons. After removing these 2 items, there weren't that many weapons that ended up in the hands of the commoners. After all, the Mount Daemo iron mine had only been mining with the solar furnace for slightly more than half a year. At the very most, there were only 500,000 kilograms of iron, and only about 50,000 weapons were forged. Even though it was already 100 times faster than before, the time was still too short. Nowadays there were more weapons among the commoners than before, but most of them were concentrated in the north. They were mainly made from the weapons left behind by Great Xia. As a result, the price of iron was still very high and only slightly lower than before. It was fine to let these students pool their money to buy 1 or 2 weapons, but they didn't have to think about the rest. 1 kilogram of iron cost about 4 taels of silver. Including the various structures, connecting rods and wheels of the steam engine, they would need at least 500 kilograms of iron, which was 4,000 taels of silver. The monthly salary of a low-level official was only 6 taels of silver. Even though most of these students came from good backgrounds, firstly, Aboriginal officials weren't very wealthy. Secondly, most of these students were good-for-nothings, who weren't very well received by their clans, so they didn't have much money. As a result, they really couldn't afford 4,000 taels of silver. Upon seeing this, Rinpoche returned to the palace and found the Empress. He specially transferred 1,500 kilograms of iron to the Black Bamboo Academy and ordered the Ministry of Works to transfer a few blacksmiths over. They partitioned a courtyard in a corner of the academy. Every day after school they would hammer there, and finally, the production of the locomotive was back on track. In fact, as long as the power problem was solved and there was a clear goal, it wasn't too difficult to complete. It was just a matter of time before a suitable structure could be developed. Only then would they be able to manufacture this horribly ugly locomotive with a hair-raising conversion rate. Even though Ren Baqin had a complete train drawing from the early 20th century in his hand, he didn't intend to take it out. He left it to the students to improve bit by bit, and the value of the harvest was much higher than that of a train. Ren Baqin had been quietly observing their changes and waiting for the day they would transform. Ren Baqin's daily life had also become one of the two places he had been looking forward to, the palace and the academy. Other than attending classes every day, he would cultivate in the palace. Every now and then he would be taught a lesson by the little Lolita. At other times he would accompany the Empress to sit in the palace in a daze or walk around the palace to observe the subtle changes. For example, the street lamps that could be seen everywhere. After returning to Lan City for a few months, Ren Baqin began to carry out his palace illumination project. When he had nothing to do, he would bring back some street lamp equipment and batteries. After a few months, there was now a street lamp every 20 meters in the palace. This allowed the palace to be brightly lit throughout the night, as if it was a city that never slept. The Empress was extremely happy with such a change. When she had nothing to do, she would sit on the roof of the palace chamber and drink wine at night. As far as her eyes could see, she would see the bright palace. At the same time, such a change made the imperial guards and maids in the palace a little uncomfortable. They didn't use torches or palace lanterns at night anymore. It was as if the palace had suddenly become a city that never slept in a few months. Regardless of whether it was day or night, there wasn't a single place that was dark. Even in other parts of Lan City, one could see the exceptionally bright palace every night. The biggest impact this had on them was that they couldn't find a place to pee anywhere they wanted. It was too bright. After all, in a brightly lit place under the watchful eyes of everyone, it took courage to pee anywhere they wanted. Similarly, the officials in the imperial court were amazed by the huge changes in the palace. At the very beginning, they had discovered the street lamps in the palace. After all, there were so many pillars on both sides of the road that it was impossible to not see them. However, there were only a few of them at that time. Coupled with the subsequent war with Great Xia and the pacification of Tianjing Basin, Ren Baqin and the Empress weren't in the palace, leaving them in Lan City to speculate. However, no matter how they speculated, there was one thing that everyone was sure of. This kind of treasure that absorbed light during the day and released at night was definitely very valuable. They didn't expect that within a few months of the Empress and Ren Baqin's return, the palace would be covered with such treasures, leaving no blind spots in the palace. Although it was extremely beautiful, it also made many people even more shocked. How much did it cost to build so many treasures and where did they come from? In addition, there were still battles going on in the northeast and southeast. The sudden change in the palace caused a lot of criticism. In fact, this wasn't the only change. Many of the windows in the palace were also replaced with glass. However, everyone knew that the glass was made by the imperial family. Although it was expensive, it didn't cause much discussion. On the contrary, these street lamps were more precious treasures than the luminous pearls in the eyes of many people. After all, how bright were the luminous pearls? How could they compare to these street lamps in the palace? This caused many officials to privately discuss that the Empress had changed and had become too extravagant. Chapter 597. Those guys were talking about the street lamps in the palace again today, the Empress said unhappily as she sat at the table. On the table between the Empress and Ren Baqin, there was a steaming hot pot exuding an alluring aroma. Not far from them there was an ice basin and a fan blowing cool air at them. Your Majesty, did you lose your temper again? Ren Baqin filled the Empress's glass with wine and asked with a smile. The Empress snorted. In any case, the Dayo court was full of tough people, and it wasn't a big deal for them to be kicked and slapped twice. I explained it earlier, but they didn't understand and always thought that I was too extravagant. Furthermore, they have no right to question my actions. The Empress said unhappily after drinking a glass of wine. In fact, the last sentence was what the Empress wanted to say. If it were someone else, a few more explanations would clear up everyone's doubts. However, with the Empress's temperament, how could she explain so much calmly? The officials of Dayo found it hard to understand that these street lamps weren't worth much. In fact, street lamps could be considered treasures in this world. After all, they didn't have soot and smoke and they were always bright and never extinguished. If they were sold outside, a lot of people would rush to buy them. Dayo wasn't a wealthy country, and the treasury of the palace depended entirely on Dayo's share of the gold mines to maintain the royal family's expenses. Everyone was used to this. Now that the palace had suddenly become like this, many people felt that something was wrong. However, the Empress was arrogant and only said a few words. Even if others asked, she was too lazy to explain, which caused many people to misunderstand. Perhaps I should explain to them, Rinpoche said after thinking for a while. In fact, he had heard about this before, but the Empress didn't say anything and no one asked him. He couldn't possibly go out and explain that these street lamps weren't worth much. You don't have to worry about this, the Empress said coldly. Pour me a glass of wine. Rinpoche filled the Empress's glass with wine and toasted her from afar. After drinking the wine, he changed the topic and asked, how are things in the northeast and southeast? There are 573 cities of different sizes in the Yun nation, and Zedonglai has conquered 33 cities near the border. As for the southeast, it's still small and there aren't many movements. At this point, the Empress regained some energy. Conquering a city was a big deal for any emperor. This was true even for the Empress. Are there enough troops at the front line? Rinpoche asked. Originally, the Protectorate of the Northeast only had 15,000 soldiers. Another 40,000 new soldiers were sent over, bringing the total to 55,000. Before the war with Great Xia, the Aboriginals had less than 100,000 soldiers. 55,000 was already half of the original amount. The Empress pondered for a while and said, I have already prepared to recruit 40,000 new soldiers. After the new year, I will pass down the conscription order. The food problem has been solved? Those sweet potatoes, pumpkins and potatoes of yours have played a big role. Under Gui Hong's promotion, the output is quite good. Next year, I plan to promote them on a larger scale. In addition, your canned food factory now provides rations for about 10,000 soldiers. It's just that many people are scolding you. The Empress pursed her lips and smiled when she mentioned this matter. Rinpoche was the scapegoat for this matter. This subject is a shame to receive this scolding. We can exchange the canned food for livestock in the various cities and send it to the army. Rinpoche laughed. It was already good enough that they weren't hungry, yet they were still picky. There's no need to do this for the time being. It can only provide rations for 10,000 soldiers, mainly because the transportation distance is too long. After recruiting new soldiers next year, we can use canned food, sweet potatoes, pumpkins and potatoes as rations for the new soldiers. This way we won't have to transport them to the Yun nation, the Empress said casually. Rinpoche thought about it and reckoned that he still had to bear this scolding. The two of them drank 4 bottles of sorghum wine and were slightly tipsy. Your wine tastes better. I wonder if there's any more? The Empress asked with her beautiful eyes. I have already told the Jianghu family that this kind of wine has to be brewed for 10 years before being highly purified. The Jianghu family still has a batch in the Yun nation, but they can't ship it over now. We have to wait for Protector Z to conquer more than half of the Yun nation. As Rinpoche spoke, he saw the Empress stand up and walk out. After the two of them left the hall, the Empress pulled Rinpoche and leaped onto the roof. Looking around, the entire palace was brightly lit. The Empress sat on the roof, supported her chin with her hand and said happily, I like this palace very much. Then she changed the topic and said, it's just that those people are too annoying. Rinpoche smiled bitterly. The Empress had changed her mind again. She disliked them for being long-winded and annoying, but she wasn't willing to explain in detail to them. He reached out to grab the Empress's hand and caressed it. The Empress's palm still gave off a delicate, soft and warm feeling. What do you imagine Deo to be like? The Empress allowed him to grab her arm, looked ahead and suddenly fell into deep thought. In fact, the two of them had discussed this question many times, but it required too much time to realize. Therefore, from time to time she would use this method to imagine it. Just like a girl who loved to fantasize. Standing together with your majesty is the world that I want, Rinpoche said softly. The Empress tilted her head and looked at him. Then she turned her head and said, what a slippery answer. What I want to know is what the future Deo should be like in your mind. Flying cars are everywhere. Robots do most of the work. After entering communism, the commoners have nothing to do and look at this and that on the streets every day for fun. Then the two of them looked at each other and one of them said, what are you looking at? The other one said, what's wrong with looking at you? Then the two of them punched and kicked each other. Finally it turned into a street brawl. After that, both of them were arrested and sent to the Public Order Bureau to be whipped. After Rinpoche finished speaking, he was kicked down by the Empress. This fellow's words were really too much of a wet blanket. Rinpoche got up from the ground, jumped to the top of the wall at the side, and then jumped to the main hall and sat beside the Empress. Seeing that the Empress was about to kick him, He quickly waved his hand and said, "Although I said it for fun, it's not completely fake. This kind of thing will happen when the speed of spiritual progress is far behind the speed of material progress. However, I'm afraid that I won't be able to see this scene, but your majesty might be able to." Even if Rinpoche and the Empress were at the same level, his lifespan would be much shorter than hers. Furthermore, Rinpoche had to travel between two worlds and consume a lot of his lifespan on Earth. "I won't let you die too early. However, you only move once I whip you. Tomorrow I will prepare a whip for you. If you don't practice diligently, I will whip you." The Empress tilted her head and looked at him. Her tone was full of eagerness to try. Chapter 598. It was already the middle of December in this world, but the sun was still high up in the sky like a furnace. 4 seasons of hot weather. No 2 seasons a year. One rainy season and the other dry season. Even though it was the rainy season, the weather was still stuffy. As for the dry season, it made people sweat profusely outside. A man's groaning voice came from the training ground in the palace. At this moment, Rinpoche was doing a split on the hot flagstone. Then he bent his legs toward his neck with all his might. He felt pain in his legs as if they were about to be torn apart. Another feeling he had was the pain in his balls. It was really the pain in his balls. His balls were pressed tightly against the hot flagstone, and Rinpoche inexplicably thought of the legendary fried eggs on a flagstone. For a man who was 1.75 meters tall and weighed 220 kilograms to do such a thing, what kind of F***K was this? Your body is too stiff. Hold on for another 5 minutes. Doing this every day will soften your body, and you will be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort when you practice the hunter technique. The Empress was sitting in a chair with a whip in one hand and a wine glass in the other. Behind her were the two maids, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan, who were smiling like flowers. Rinpoche looked like he was about to cry. Who did he offend? He just said a few words on the roof of the palace hall, and the next day the Empress actually did as she said and switched to using a whip. Every time he wanted to put his leg down, the Empress's whip would make a whistling sound and hit the stone slab beside him. The entire stone slab would crack. One had to know that this was a stone slab that was 2 inches thick. "Your Majesty, it's almost cooked." Rinpoche felt wronged. "Pass down the order to apply the purple grass ointment on him before training tomorrow," the Empress said to Hong Yuan. "Yes, Your Majesty." Hong Yuan pursed her lips and smiled. "Forget it, I can still hold on for a while." Rinpoche's facial expression suddenly changed. Purple grass ointment was roughly equivalent to essential balm in this world, but it had some other effects. However, Rinpoche absolutely didn't want to experience applying essential balm to his balls a second time. After persevering for 5 minutes with great difficulty, Rinpoche nimbly jumped up, ran to the chair beside the Empress and lay down. Then he gulped down a big mouthful of iced fruit juice and finally felt alive. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan used the canopy to shield him from the shadows. "I thought I almost died." Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. "It's not that I want to watch over you, but you are too lazy," the Empress said helplessly. Rinpoche was good in other aspects, but he was too lazy when it came to practicing martial arts. It was better to cultivate the Rui visualization. After all, this was the foundation. As for the other martial arts, he didn't care about them at all. For a whole year the only thing he could use was probably the Fist of Death. Rinpoche's progress in the hunter art, which was highly valued by the Empress, had always been slow. When Rinpoche practiced it himself, he would immediately give up when the pain level reached a certain level. As a result, the Empress had no choice but to keep an eye on him. She even resorted to using her whip. However, the Empress felt that using a whip was rather fun. "But I see that Her Majesty is quite happy when she wields the whip." Rinpoche looked resentful. Qing Yuan pursed her lips and smiled. "Sir Ren's treatment is unique, and Her Majesty doesn't care about others so much." Rinpoche sighed faintly. This was life. The hardest thing to bear was the kindness of a beauty. Wasn't that right? However, it was especially hard to bear the kindness of a beauty like the Empress. During dinner with the Empress, Rinpoche said, "Your Majesty, do you want to experience the atmosphere of New Year on Earth? It's completely different from Dayo. There are no walls full of skeletons and the atmosphere is much more normal." The Empress muttered, "Has Luoshan finished? It should be the last 2 episodes." Rinpoche's face immediately turned black. "Your Majesty, are you still thinking about watching the show?" "Let's go then," the Empress said after some thought. Otherwise she would have to wait for Rinpoche to download it and bring it back. Rinpoche opened his mouth. Where did that cold and aloof empress go? Why did she become a drama-crazed demon? Your Majesty, you have to go back to my house for New Year's and see my parents. Rinpoche gave her a heads-up to avoid any unpredictable situations. I saw them the last time. Although they are quiet, they are quite kind, the Empress said after some thought. She still remembered Rinpoche's parents. That's because they are quiet in front of you. They are usually very mischievous. Especially my father. Rinpoche thought about this sentence but didn't say it out loud. It was good that the Empress didn't react. This year he could bring the Empress back to celebrate the New Year with him. It wasn't bad as long as his parents didn't dare to take a deep breath like last time. The two of them returned to Earth in Rinpoche's room. As the house became more and more crowded, he changed from the living room to his bedroom every time. The two of them only saw the surrounding air distort and the environment change. Then there was a clamor from downstairs which sounded like a market. They could also vaguely hear voices like, 4 twos, and little one. Both of them changed their clothes, and the Empress immediately transformed from a monarch into a city beauty. She wore a long red dress. Alright, it had always been red. Then she wore a pair of flat-soled cloth shoes. The old Beijing cloth shoes were worn by the Empress and gave off the vibe of a top international luxury brand. Her hair casually scattered down her back like a waterfall. Hello, boss lady boss. The children left on Earth in the mountains were no longer 6 muscular men, but 16. Seeing the two of them coming down from upstairs, the sofa and other things immediately clattered. Wine bottles fell all over the floor, and 2 decks of poker cards were scattered. Imagine the scene of 16 burly men who weighed 150 kilograms drinking. The petite Dingjie was like a bean sprout sandwiched among them. His face was painted with the word tortoise, and he looked aggrieved as he shouted, "Boss, lady boss." All 16 of them had clean faces. Only Dingjie's face was covered in scars. He was almost unrecognizable. Rinpoche wondered if they were playing a game where whoever won could paint a tortoise on his face. Rinpoche couldn't bear to ask why only Dingjie's face was painted with tortoise. He couldn't bear to ask if he should give Dingjie a raise. However, after thinking about how Dingjie seemed to have followed and called her lady boss, he decided to forget about the raise. It's the New Year the day after tomorrow. Aren't you going back? Rinpoche looked at Dingjie and asked. My flight is tomorrow morning, Dingjie immediately replied. Rinpoche nodded, then called Xinfeng to book 2 round-trip tickets for him. After the call, the dozen winged cavalry warriors cleaned up the area around the sofa. Rinpoche lazily sat on the sofa and said, You can't just eat, sleep and beat Dao here every day. You have to do something. Lady boss, who is Dao? The 16 winged cavalry warriors asked curiously. I am Dao. Dingjie said indignantly with a tortoise face. When he thought about this, he felt like a resentful wife. This was simply a tragedy. What happened to the poor mountain children? How did it turn out like this? Cough cough. Rinpoche coughed. I originally wanted to set up a security company, but after thinking about it, I decided to build a few martial arts centers. It's more suitable for all of you. Rinpoche's original goal wasn't to bring more than a dozen winged cavalry warriors to guard the door, but to establish his own power to prevent himself from being restricted. Currently, the winged cavalry warriors had stayed here for more than a year and had a basic understanding of the situation on Earth. It was time to let them out. Where's Luotian? Help me find it. The Empress poked Rinpoche. Half of Rinpoche's body immediately went numb. Rinpoche found Luotian for the Empress and then continued to say to everyone with a calm face, You probably have an idea. Dingjie, when the time comes you won't have to stay idle. I will make arrangements for you. Why can I only watch it for 6 minutes? The Empress poked Rinpoche again. Half of Rinpoche's body went numb again. He glanced at the Empress with a hidden bitterness, took the phone, looked at it and said, The membership period has expired. I will charge it now. After he was done, Rinpoche looked up at everyone in front of him, opened his mouth and suddenly forgot what he wanted to say. Chapter 599. Early the next morning, Rinpoche and the Empress went downstairs and saw the 16 winged cavalry warriors standing there in an orderly manner with looks of anticipation on their faces. Shi Yang and Gulu in particular were just short of shouting, It's me, it's me, it's me. Rinpoche's face was bright and full of expression. Last year he had brought Shi Yang and Gulu home as guards to celebrate the New Year. In the end, the two of them staged a victorious escape. They caused trouble along the way and even ran to San Fatso's place. This year, Sanfatso had even invited the two of them for a vacation several times, all through the government, and young Senator Rinpoche didn't know how the two of them had moved the post-80s generation, who was regarded as the strongest in the world and resisted the pressure from the whole world. Xiongbing Suwei, you two. The rest of you stay here obediently. I'll get someone to send wine and meat over. Rinpoche glanced at the winged cavalry warriors and picked two of them who had arrived first to be his guards. The two of them were immediately overjoyed. They had been listening to them boast about their experiences in the outside world every day for the past year, which made the others very envious. After the four of them went out, Rinpoche occasionally turned to look at the Empress as he drove. What are you looking at? If you continue to look, I will gouge out your eyeballs. The Empress said coldly, feeling uncomfortable under his gaze. Rinpoche smiled and said, It's rare to see your Majesty put on makeup and dress up. You look even more beautiful. Today the Empress was wearing a red dress with a black coat. She actually applied a layer of lipstick today, which was very rare. Even though she didn't put on any other makeup, her fiery red lips made her look even more gorgeous. The two people in the back seat didn't dare to reply and completely pretended not to hear anything. The Empress snorted softly and turned to look out of the window. Even though she had never celebrated the New Year in this world, she had seen it in many TV dramas. At least she knew that it was quite important, especially when the whole city would be filled with fireworks during the New Year, which made her look forward to it very much. Hey, Steel Centipede! The Empress suddenly called out. Rinpoche turned to look and saw a mother and son by the roadside. The child was only 5 or 6 years old, and the mother was in her early 30s. There was also a mechanical dog crawling under their feet. The steel centipede that the Empress was referring to was the mechanical dog. The Empress's first mechanical dog was destroyed by Qin Ping. Rinpoche made a few more for the Empress. She named them Steel Centipede, Steel Tooth, Steel Bone, Steel Bar, Steel Skin and Steel Claw. She liked them for a period of time. However, recently the Empress rarely charged them. She didn't expect to see someone else's robot dog here and was reminded of it. In fact, when the Empress saw that mechanical dog, she was reminded of the days when she liked those little things. She was a little sentimental. After all, those mechanical dogs were still a very happy memory in her mind, and there weren't many such things in her memory. It was already February 11, 2021. Another year had passed in a flash. Although Shanghai had not changed much, there were still some differences. Rinpoche had seen advertisements for self-driving cars many times. In fact, he had seen quite a few of them along the way. This made him decide to buy one to free his hands. In this way he could even give up the idea of letting those idiots get a driver's license. He believed that those idiots would definitely drive a car like a tank. In addition, there were many self-driving banks and supermarkets that had only been tried out a few years ago. Occasionally they could be seen on certain street corners. Advertisements for homeschooling robots were everywhere and could often be seen on self-driving buses. Even small hospitals that mainly used medical robots had begun to appear. It was said that ordinary diseases could be diagnosed, prescribed, and even given intravenous drips by robots that were connected to the internet in such small hospitals. In the future, such medical robot hospitals would be promoted to every community and street. They would even enter many families like homeschooling robots. Flying motorcycles weren't available due to air traffic control. However, he had already seen scenes of flying motorcycles flying everywhere in some oil-producing countries. Some countries had already begun to prepare for new air traffic regulations. For China, this was an unstoppable future. Everything was developing and changing at a rapid pace. Even Rinpoche didn't know what the future of Earth would be like. The times were changing too fast, and it was even faster for him. He always felt that he would be abandoned by the new era at any time. Every time he came back, he would seize the opportunity to understand the changes on Earth. When they arrived in Shurching, it was snowing. This made Xiongbing and Suwei a little excited. It was rare to see snow in Dayo. Even the Empress would stretch out her hand to touch the fluttering snowflakes in the air. When the surrounding people saw them, they knew that they were from the south. However, with Xiongbing and Suwei, these two fierce-looking big guys around, no one dared to talk to them. They hailed 2 taxis and went straight to their hometown. On the way, Rinpoche received a call from Mama Rin and returned home before the sky turned dark in the afternoon. When they returned, Rinpoche's father was still carrying things and smoking and bragging with his neighbor at the corridor entrance. When he saw them, he immediately beamed with joy. "You are back." Rinpoche's father put on a stern face and put on a dignified front in front of his neighbor. He then warmly said to the Empress, "Zixiao is here too. Why are you wearing so little? And these two?" The Empress was wearing a red dress and a black fur coat, which indeed looked a little thin. Your eldest son is back? The neighbor was also a man in his 50s. He had long heard that this family had an eldest son who was very rich and lived in another place. This was the first time he saw him. After looking at them, he immediately felt apprehensive. The lady was extremely beautiful and didn't look like an ordinary person. As for the other three, not only did they not look like ordinary people, but they also didn't look like good people. Especially those two with ferocious faces, it would make anyone's heart tremble at the sight of them. There was also a burly man who should be the eldest son of the Ren family, right? They were the same family, but why was there such a big difference? Rinpoche looked at the Ren family's elderly couple and the youngest son who occasionally came back, and they all looked kind and normal. But this one, and the two behind, were obviously not the same kind of people. Subconsciously, he felt that he should stay away from the Ren family. Let's talk another day. We are going up first. Rinpoche's father said to his neighbor and warmly greeted them. It's cold outside, come in quickly. After entering the elevator, Rinpoche looked at the Empress and found that her body was a little stiff. Her gaze was also a little wandering as she kept staring at the ceiling. Rinpoche reached out to grab the Empress's hand and was ruthlessly squeezed. Ah! Rinpoche's face turned green as he took a deep breath. He felt that the bones in his hand were about to break. What's wrong? Rinpoche quickly looked over and then looked up at the ceiling, but he didn't see anything. Nothing. Rinpoche took a deep breath and turned to look at the Empress with an aggrieved look. The Empress glared at him, which made him feel a little baffled. He didn't do anything to provoke her. After entering the house, Rinpoche called out to Mama Rin, "Look who's here." Brother. Rin Wanyin came out of the room and was pleasantly surprised when he saw his brother. Sister-in-law. This is the first time I've seen you in person. You're even more beautiful than in photos. Prettier than a celebrity. The Empress nodded slightly as a form of greeting. As for Rin Wanyin's words, she calmly accepted them. She had always thought that people who weren't Rinpoche were speaking a very normal truth that didn't need to be doubted. Did she need to care about other people speaking the truth? No need. Therefore, she naturally didn't feel that there was anything wrong with such praise. However, the way she looked at Rin Wanyin became gentler and more pleasing to the eye. Chapter 600. For the rest of the night, Mama Rin, Papa Rin, and Rin Wanyin practically circled around the Empress. The three of them didn't talk much. After all, it took a lot of courage to talk to the Empress. The three of them didn't know the Empress's hobbies and didn't know what to say. The Empress's aura didn't allow them to casually talk about their daily lives. The three of them lingered around the Empress from time to time. Occasionally, Rinpoche could hear Mama Rin talking on the phone and saying things like, "My son's girlfriend is here, so I won't be going." Perhaps all parents in the world had the heart to show off. From showing off their obedience in the beginning, to showing off their studies, to showing off their work, to showing off their income, to showing off their daughter-in-law, and finally to showing off their grandchildren, there was nothing to flaunt about money. Papa Rin and Mama Rin had started to hide their wealth to avoid some troublesome matters. After all, he was a member of the older generation, so he was quite cautious in this aspect. Her son had been away for several years and rarely showed his face. Although he had always said that he had a girlfriend, he had never shown her face, which made many people mutter incessantly. "Look, this is my daughter-in-law." Mama Rin took a selfie that Rinpoche had taken when he was fleeing for his life abroad. Then, many surprised voices could be heard. This was also what Mama Rin liked to talk about recently. Now that her son and daughter-in-law were finally at home, she wanted the whole world to know. Whose daughter-in-law was so beautiful? Such temperament? He was a civil servant, and his position was not low at all. It could be said to be perfect. That night, the Empress was exhausted. Although she seemed to be sitting in the same position, there were always people hovering around her. It was very uncomfortable. At night, the Empress finally found an opportunity to ask Rinpoche softly, "When are we going to set off the fireworks?" Rinpoche asked, "What fireworks?" "What fireworks? It was banned a long time ago. How could there be fireworks?" The Empress's face immediately turned black. He was hoping to see the fireworks in the city, but he was told that there weren't any? Do you want to be whipped? When Rinpoche saw the Empress's expression, he immediately figured it out. Could it be that the Empress came over so happily just to watch the fireworks? Otherwise, why would he ask this question at this time? He immediately changed the topic and said, "But if you want to set off fireworks, who would refuse? Even if it's forbidden, it's not impossible. However, the others are within the forbidden range. When the time comes, I can only release them myself." The Empress thought about it. She wanted to see the whole city filled with fireworks. If he couldn't see it, then releasing it himself was also an option. However, the root of his teeth was still itching. He felt that he had been cheated this time. He had worked hard for a whole night, and it was very likely that he would have to work hard for another night, but in the end he didn't see anything. Although the whole city full of fireworks was something she had imagined after watching the TV series, she had selectively forgotten about it. There were 4 rooms in this house, and there was a guest room for the Empress to stay in. As for the 2 winged cavalry warriors, they squeezed into the same room as Rinpoche and were chased out to sleep in the living room. The 2 of them didn't mind. What kind of environment had they not experienced in the winged cavalry? Too many times in the wilderness, it was already good enough to have a roof to cover one's body. It was just that when Rinpoche went to the toilet in the middle of the night, he almost got a fright. With the help of the light from the room, he saw 2 people sitting on the sofa. Their eyes were bright, like light bulbs in the dark night. In the middle of the night, these 2 silhouettes were really scary. "Why aren't the 2 of you asleep yet?" Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief and asked. In the end, the 2 of them didn't respond at all. Rinpoche frowned, and his heart immediately skipped a beat. The 2 of them weren't replying. What had happened? What happened? Xiong Su Wei. Rinpoche called out softly, but the 2 of them still didn't respond. Rinpoche's heart immediately tightened. Had something happened? However, after thinking about it carefully, there shouldn't be anything on earth that could affect the 2 of them. Even if there was something, it couldn't be hidden from the Empress who was sleeping next door. After standing still for 2 minutes, Rinpoche reached out to turn on the light with his heart in his mouth. He then saw the 2 of them sitting upright on the sofa with their eyes wide open, looking ahead as if they were staring at something. Rinpoche looked in the direction that the 2 of them were looking at. Other than the television hanging on the wall, there was nothing else. What exactly is going on? Rinpoche stood there and carefully sized them up for a long time, but he couldn't see anything. He went forward to take a closer look at the 2 of them, only to find that their eyes were slack and completely unfocused. He stretched out his hand and waved it in front of their eyes, but they didn't react at all. Their chests were moving up and down, but they were still alive. Rinpoche's heart was in his mouth again. Could something have happened to the 2 of them? They were both winged cavalry warriors, so what could have happened to them? Could it be that they had been restrained by someone? Who could restrain the 2 of them without alerting the Empress? It was impossible for such a person to appear on Earth, right? Even if it was that mysterious monk. Could it really be that mysterious monk? It shouldn't be. That monk didn't have any conflicts with him, and he even received the second batch of peaches from him 2 months ago. Could it be that there was someone like that monk on Earth? At the thought of this, Rinpoche's eyes suddenly sharpened, and he shouted in a low voice, "Who is it?" There was silence. Rinpoche looked around the room and saw that there was nothing wrong with the surroundings. There wasn't a single person, and the windows and doors were all tightly shut. "Don't blame me if you don't come out now." There was still silence. Was there really no one? What exactly happened? Could it be that there was something supernatural that he didn't understand? Rinpoche raised his vigilance. After confirming that there was no danger, he gently shook their shoulders. Their slack eyes immediately focused, and they looked at Rinpoche as if they had just woken up from a dream. "Lady Boss? What's wrong? What's wrong with the 2 of you?" Rinpoche looked around vigilantly and asked. "Resting." "That's right, resting." Rinpoche's face immediately darkened. He had been pondering for half a day, but the 2 of them had been sleeping peacefully. Were the 2 of them sleeping with their eyes open? And both of them together? And their eyes were opened wide like copper bells? And they were sleeping so soundly? Rinpoche didn't know what to say. He ignored the 2 of them with a gloomy face and strolled to the bathroom to relieve himself. He then came out with 2 towels and placed them on their heads, covering their faces. "Sir Rin? Cover your faces so that you don't scare people." Rinpoche turned off the lights with a gloomy face. He looked back with the light in the room and inexplicably felt like the zombies in Lin Jingying's zombie movies. After returning to his room to sleep for a short while, he heard the sound of another door opening, followed by Ren Wanyan's frightened scream. Then Rinpoche's parents went out to check. After a period of noise, the room finally quieted down again. The next day Ren Wanyan woke up with dark circles under his eyes. He looked at Rinpoche bitterly and said, "Brother, I was scared to death last night." Rinpoche snorted and naturally wouldn't tell him that he was also scared to death last night and even had a battle of wits with the air for half a day. Not long after, Papa Ren and Mama Ren came out, followed by the Empress. Among them, only the Empress wasn't affected much. In fact, the Empress also couldn't sleep last night. Living in such an unfamiliar environment and surrounded by a few unfamiliar but important people, the Empress actually suffered from insomnia, which was rare. Naturally, he could hear everything that was happening outside clearly. Even Ren Baqin, who was having a battle of wits with the air, could hear it clearly. Although she didn't see many things, she could completely imagine them. However, she had no intention of reminding Ren Baqin and listened to him entertain himself for a long time. Chapter 601. Since morning, Ren Baqin had been instructing the two winged cavalry warriors to paste couplets and the word Fu on the door. The Empress was also watching excitedly from behind. A little more to the left. To the left. Do you know where the left is? Zixia, what do you think? Ren Baqin turned to look at the Empress. Heaven lengthens the years, man lengthens the lifespan, and spring fills the universe with fortune. What a good poem. What are the next two lines? The Empress praised softly as she recited the couplets on both sides of the door. There's nothing below. Oh, it's a eunuch, the Empress said with slight regret. Ren Baqin's expression suddenly became interesting. He wanted to laugh, but he thought that he would most likely be beaten up, so he held it in. The words look good, but there's no essence, chi, and spirit in it. It's low quality. It's not even as good as your words that crawled out of nowhere. The Empress commented again. Thank you for your praise, Your Majesty. Ren Baqin looked up at them and said, Put your hands down. Why are you still pressing them? They put their hands down and saw two clear palm prints on the couplets. They were completely imprinted on the inside of the door, and they were at least 1 centimeter deep. Ren Baqin's mouth twitched as he chased them into the house. After entering the house, Papa Ren went out to check if the couplets were crooked. After a while, he came back with a complicated look on his face. He looked at the two winged cavalry warriors as if they were livestock. Every month, Ren Baqin's parents and Ren Wanyin would receive the meat that Ren Baqin brought back from the other world. Compared to their hard work, the speed of their cultivation was considered very fast. Even compared to those who practiced martial arts in the military, their speed wasn't slow. After a year, their strength had increased a lot. Mama Ren didn't even pant when she carried 50 kilograms of rice upstairs. However, looking at the deep palm prints on the door, he still felt that they were livestock. In particular, they weren't made with a single slap. There wasn't any sound previously, and they were obviously directly pressed down, which was even more terrifying. Even Papa Ren felt that if humans could become so terrifying, the world might really undergo great changes in the future. Papa Ren took the time to chat with Ren Baqin during the day, but both of them felt the same. With the rapid advancement of technology and martial arts, no one knew what the world would become in the future. Papa Ren wasn't too worried about himself. After all, these changes wouldn't happen overnight, and he was already old. He was just a little worried about Ren Baqin and Ren Wanyin's future. Don't worry about me. I have money and power. No matter what happens, I won't lose out. Ren Baqin saw through his father's thoughts, waved his hand and smiled. Rich and powerful? Papa Ren scoffed. How can you be considered rich and powerful with that little bit of money? In the eyes of the common people it was fine, but in the eyes of the truly rich and powerful, it was nothing. In the past, it would at most be considered a humble family. Father, do you have some kind of misunderstanding about the poor? Do you have some kind of misunderstanding about the poor? Do you think ordinary people are poor? Ordinary people couldn't even be considered poor. The commoners were also called the commoners, which corresponded to the landowning families. Only those who had the prestige of a county could be called a soldier, and those who had the prestige of a county could only be called a squire or a commoner. In the past, a prefecture was about the size of a province. A county was now an ordinary prefecture-level city. To have enough prestige in an ordinary prefecture-level city and have a considerable say in a city, even if one wasn't the richest person in the city, it wasn't far off. How much was the richest man in a city worth? Let's not talk about anything else. Do you know about the Xiao clan? It's at least 10 billion yuan. What's that little bit of money? Furthermore, you haven't even passed the 3rd generation. Saying that you are from a humble family is already flattering you. Papa Ren's rebuke made Ren Baqin's face turn black. Following which, he looked puzzled and asked, Is this what a humble family means? Ignorant and incompetent thing, do you think you are from a humble family just because you don't wear warm clothes in winter? Papa Ren rebuked Ren Baqin and was immediately in a good mood. It had been a long time since he established his prestige like this. Stop showing off what you have. Your father has been learning from you ever since and is now fascinated by classical culture. He studies it all day long. Mama Rin stuck her head out from the kitchen and exposed Papa Rin. One is never too old to learn. Papa Rin didn't mind at all. At least he could still teach his son a lesson. Lady Boss will be a member of the imperial family in the future. How can she be from a humble family? The two winged cavalry warriors grinned. Lady Boss? Imperial family? Papa Rin opened his mouth and subconsciously looked at the Empress. Seeing that she was calm and had no intention of refuting, he didn't know whether she heard it or not. However, imperial family. Could this daughter-in-law be a relative of one of the higher-ups? Papa Ren's mind spun and was immediately shocked. He glanced at the Empress again and felt that it was more likely. Based on the aura of this daughter-in-law, how could she be raised by an ordinary family? Furthermore, Renbaqian's two subordinates were obviously not ordinary people. How could they be ordinary people who could directly leave 4 fingerprints on the security door? Where did Renbaqian get such subordinates from? Could he hire such subordinates with that little bit of money? Who was he trying to fool? Where did these subordinates come from? It was terrifying to think about it. Papa Ren's face first turned pale, then green and finally black. He jumped up and walked into the house. What's wrong? Renbaqian was shocked when he saw his father's facial expression changing rapidly. Renbaqian didn't know what was going through his father's mind. I'm going to eat a bottle of 6-flavor Remania pills to calm myself down, Papa Ren said without looking back. Pfft. Renbaqian immediately spurted out his drink. When Papa Ren came back, he didn't mention anything about the poor family anymore and acted as if nothing had happened. The moment he opened his mouth, he would talk about how wise the current leader was. When he closed his mouth, he would talk about how good the current development situation was and how it was all thanks to the leadership of the party. It was only then that he realized what his father had imagined. However, those two winged cavalry warriors weren't wrong. They were indeed from the imperial family, but it was different from what his father thought. After thinking about it, Renbaqian pulled his father aside and said, Zixiao's identity is special. It's not what you think. Special? I understand. I can't tell you about this. Don't worry, I've eaten more salt than you've eaten rice. How can I not understand? Papa Ren had a look of understanding on his face. Then he pondered deeply. If Zixiao was only outstanding and had an outstanding family background, it would be fine. However, since she had connections with the higher-ups, it would be troublesome. Could he still see her as his daughter-in-law? Was it really okay for her to be with his son? Renbaqian looked at his expression and was speechless. You really don't understand. She has nothing to do with the higher-ups. Papa Ren immediately understood. So it wasn't the higher-ups but the next Empress? Had the next Empress already been decided? Alright, I know what you're up to. It's just that I can't interfere in your matters. Pay more attention. Papa Ren shook his head. Renbaqian realized that if he didn't explain clearly, his father wouldn't understand. However, could he explain the Empress's identity? Oh, the Empress of another world? Forget it. Renbaqian thought about it and decided not to explain. The more he explained, the worse it would be. For the rest of the afternoon, his father didn't show any signs of abnormality. In fact, he didn't even mention anything about Mama Ren. He was the only one who was worried from time to time. At around 7 o'clock in the evening, Renbaqian dragged the Empress and the two winged cavalry warriors downstairs. Renwanyan followed them. When they arrived downstairs, there were already 2 SUVs and a half-built truck waiting there. The truck was wrapped tightly with canvas. Brother, why are you being so secretive? Renwanyan looked at his brother, then at the 2 bears, and then at his sister-in-law. They were all wearing thin clothing and didn't feel cold at all in this minus 20 degrees Celsius weather. He was the only one who was wrapped up tightly. When he pulled down the zipper of the truck, he felt a gust of cold wind blowing in. He shivered and quickly pulled the zipper back. Let's set off the fireworks. Renbaqian called out and got into the truck. The group drove for 20 minutes to the suburbs, found an empty space and untied the canvas. Sure enough, the truck was loaded with all kinds of fireworks. Not long after, the first firework bloomed in the sky. Then more fireworks rose into the sky. The Empress looked up at the fireworks. The flickering light reflected on her face, and her face was full of serenity and gentleness. Renbaqian reached out and held the Empress's hand tightly. The two of them stood shoulder to shoulder. Are you cold? Ren Baqian asked softly as he looked at Ren Wanyin and the two winged cavalry warriors who were happily setting off fireworks in the distance. As long as the Empress said that she was cold, he would be able to hug her justifiably. I'm not cold. Oh, but I'm so cold. Your Majesty, please hug me. Ren Baqian said with a smile and waited for the incoming kick. He was already mentally prepared for a close encounter with the snow. However, the Empress hugged him from behind, placed her chin on his shoulder and asked softly, "Are you warm?" "Very warm." Ren Baqian smiled and held the Empress's hands that were wrapped in front of him. In the distance, two winged cavalry warriors inadvertently raised their heads and saw the Empress and Ren Baqian. They then turned their heads away with a peaceful smile on their faces and happily set off fireworks. Chapter 602. Ren Baqian and the Empress originally thought that they would enjoy the festive atmosphere and spend 2 leisurely days here. However, it turned out that they were thinking too much. For the past few years, the Empress had only heard of her name but never seen her. Furthermore, Mama Ren had praised her to the skies. She had finally shown her face. She was no longer just a breathtaking photo. From the first day of the new year onwards, almost all of Ren Baqian's aunts personally visited the Ren family. People were coming and going just like the city gates of Lan City. Nominally they were here to visit. In reality they were here to watch. In the past, they would go to his uncle's house and his two aunts' houses on the 4th and 5th days of the new year. Now everything had changed. After 2 days, Ren Baqian couldn't take it anymore and fled with the Empress. As for the two winged cavalry warriors, Ren Baqian bought plane tickets, threw a bank card with 100,000 yuan, and gave them a stern warning before starting a brand new winged cavalry adventure. The two winged cavalry warriors were naturally overjoyed. They had heard those two fools bragging for a year and now it was finally their turn. They felt that they would be letting down their conscience if they didn't do something exciting. Unlike the previous two, the goal of these two wasn't to return to Shanghai. Ren Baqian naturally didn't know what kind of trouble they would create for him. At this moment he was squatting. After finding a place to squat, he and the Empress returned to Dayo. This time they stayed for 5 days and there wasn't much time left. When he finished relaxing and wiped his butt with a piece of tissue, his expression changed drastically. He actually felt a meatball through the tissue, and it was very painful. Could this be the legendary hemorrhoids? Could it be that he would become a person with hemorrhoids in the future? Ren Baqian shuddered at the thought of such a future. Although 9 out of 10 men and 10 out of 10 women had hemorrhoids, Ren Baqian had always been smiling. When his college roommates used potassium permanganate to wash their buttocks every night, he always had a kind smile on his face. However, when this happened to him he was completely dumbfounded. How did he get such a painful illness that made him feel restless and doubt his life? Who had ever seen an expert get hemorrhoids? Imagine if Qiao Feng suddenly had a hemorrhoid attack at the Virtuous Manor. Thinking back to the sword duel on Mount Hua, many experts had twisted their way up to the peak of Mount Hua with their chrysanthemums between their legs. The final battle at the peak of Mount Hua, and then each of them had to find a place to apply hemorrhoid cream. Thinking about it, Xiao Yan covered his buttocks and said with a twisted face, "Don't bully a young man for being poor." Thinking back to when Han Paopao had fought alongside Nangong Wan in the cave against the evil flood dragon. Then he had shouted, "Help me hold off for 5 minutes." Then he had run behind Nangong Wan to find a place to take off his pants and apply some hemorrhoid medicine. For example, during the final battle between Wang Chao and God, the blood in his body surged as he hammered repeatedly, causing his lower body to spurt out blood. Was the plot still watchable? Why did it become like this when it was his turn? Ren Baqian's heart crumbled. Ever since he put on his pants, the pain in his butthole had been continuous. When he stretched his legs and walked out of the toilet with a deathly pale face, the Empress was waiting for him in the distance. The two of them were in a restaurant. They originally planned to eat something, go to the toilet and then find a place to go back. They didn't expect such a huge unforeseen event to happen. It was practically an apocalyptic disaster. "What's wrong?" the Empress asked faintly when she saw that he didn't look well. "Nothing." Ren Baqian's lips trembled. He couldn't possibly tell the Empress that his butthole had bloomed, right? He couldn't say it. "Go back?" The Empress didn't ask when she saw that he wasn't going to say it. "I can't go back. I have to check something." Ren Baqian looked like he was about to cry. He quickly checked the map and walked forward with his legs splayed. He didn't dare to take more than 30 centimeters of a step. He didn't dare to take bigger steps because it hurt. "Pharmacy. Mine long. Pharmacy. Mine long." Rinpoche nervously looked at the map on his phone and searched for the pharmacy that wasn't far ahead. He had never felt that time was so important. In the past he would finish all kinds of things 2 to 3 hours in advance and then wait to travel between worlds. Now he could go back at any time. He might only have 1 minute left, 10 minutes, or even half an hour left. This was because he had never calculated time so accurately before. He had to race against time to buy hemorrhoid ointment from the pharmacy. He didn't even have time to go online to learn how to treat hemorrhoids. When he saw the pharmacy that he was looking for appear on the roadside a dozen meters ahead, he finally revealed an excited expression. He turned to look at the Empress and saw that she was silently following behind him. Seeing that Rinpoche had turned around, the Empress looked at him with a puzzled expression and asked, "Why are you walking so strangely? Are you injured? What happened?" Rinpoche squeezed out a dry smile and replied, "It's a small problem that will be solved soon." Following Rinpoche's words, the air around him began to fluctuate rhythmically. The Empress immediately grabbed onto Rinpoche's arm. When Rinpoche realized that the scenery in front of him had changed, his face immediately changed. He didn't make it in time. He actually didn't buy hemorrhoid ointment. What exactly happened? The Empress squinted her eyes and asked. "It's really nothing serious. Your Majesty, you don't have to worry." Rinpoche replied with a green face. "Why is it so strange all of a sudden?" The Empress was puzzled. Rinpoche was fine just a moment ago, but he became like this after going to the toilet. It wasn't easy for him to fool the Empress. After bidding farewell, Rinpoche walked back to where he came from. He wondered if there was a disease like hemorrhoids in this world. He wondered if the doctors would be able to treat it. After thinking about it, Rinpoche wasn't sure. Looking at the guards behind him, Rinpoche gritted his teeth and asked, "Sure who? Let me ask you something." "Principal, what's the matter?" Sure who took 2 steps forward and asked, "Do you know what hemorrhoids are?" Rinpoche looked embarrassed. "I only know arrow sores." Sure who's face darkened. "Then do you know that the chrysanthemum is sick?" "What kind of flower is chrysanthemum?" "Forget it. It's fine." Rinpoche sighed. When he returned to his room, he lay on the bed and started to toss and turn restlessly. It hurts. Tonight, he discovered many problems that he had never paid attention to before. For example, there were always people who said that the chrysanthemum would tighten. When would the chrysanthemum tighten? Rinpoche had never paid attention to it before, but now he knew that it would happen when the chrysanthemum was loosening. Not only would it tighten once, but it would also tighten twice and thrice. Every time the chrysanthemum tightened, that feeling, that sour feeling, made Rinpoche feel so much pain that he wanted to die. For example, coughing. Rinpoche had never thought that the chrysanthemum would actually tighten when coughing. For example, when he stood up, did anyone know that the chrysanthemum would also tighten when standing up? This night, Rinpoche experienced all of them. That night he was half asleep and half awake. The next day he woke up late, which was rare. He immediately asked the guards to give the students a day off. He felt that he had to go to the doctor's office. Chapter 603. Change a carriage. Rinpoche looked at the fork-horned cow that the guards brought over and hesitated for a while, but he didn't have the courage to climb up. In the end, they switched to a large 4-wheeled ox cart and left the palace in a grandiose manner, heading towards the clinic. Rinpoche was restless in the carriage. After a long bumpy ride, he finally arrived near the clinic, but the guards in front suddenly stopped. "Make way. This is Principal Ren's carriage. Stop glaring and make way." "What's going on?" Rinpoche lifted the curtain and asked. "Sir Tong and Sir Qin's guards are blocking the entrance of the clinic." "Oh." Rinpoche didn't expect them to be at the clinic. Fortunately, the carriage continued to move forward. Rinpoche looked to both sides and saw 5 burly men glaring at him with murderous looks. Obviously, the murderous look wasn't directed at him but at another group of people. Since the relationship between the family heads wasn't good, the guards naturally tried to kill them with their glares. Rinpoche ignored them and had more important matters to attend to. The carriage moved forward a few steps before stopping. Rinpoche carefully got out of the carriage, tried his best to spread his legs, and staggered into the clinic. "Sir, which doctor are you looking for?" Sure who asked. Rinpoche stood rooted to the ground and pondered. How would he know which doctor to look for? He didn't even know if the clinic could treat this illness. How could he express the question he wanted to ask in a way that the other party could understand and not have too much of a reaction? Then Rinpoche heard Qin Chuan's wild laughter from the courtyard next door. Old man, take a few steps if you have nothing to do. I'm naturally fine. Tong Jingye snorted. Your steps are like those of a great Xia woman. Minister Tong of the Ministry of Works. Ah. Qin Chuan burst into laughter. If you are fine, take a few steps if you have nothing to do. Tong Jingye immediately retorted. I'm naturally fine. Take a few steps. Could it be that you're afraid? Let's go. Why would I be afraid of an ignorant man like you? Then Tong Jingye laughed wildly. Old man, your pants are wet, and you still say you are fine? Aha, Minister Qin of the Ministry of War is actually bleeding? This old man was only hit by one arrow. Qin Chuan snorted. An arrow in the buttocks? Tong Jingye's laughter could even be heard from outside the courtyard. Bah, how much better can you be? If you're not convinced, then let's spar. Qin Chuan said angrily. How can you compete in your current state? Tong Jingye continued to burst into laughter. Let's run from here to the city gate and back. Do you dare? Tong Jingye pondered for a moment and said, Why should I compete with an ignorant man like you whose pants are drenched in blood? I'm ashamed to be associated with you. Qin Chuan immediately flew into a rage. Ren Baqin then heard the sound of punches and kicks coming from the courtyard next door. Ren Baqin's face was bright and full of expression. Just now, the conversation between the two of them made him think of a possibility. Could it be that these two old fellows were suffering from hemorrhoids at the same time? Ren Baqin gestured to the guard and tiptoed into the courtyard to take a look. Even though the two of them were punching and kicking, their movements were very strange. It was obvious that they didn't dare to use too much strength and didn't even dare to make any big movements. If they made any big movements, they would grimace in pain. Ren Baqin felt that this possibility was even greater. Looking at their movements, he could imagine what kind of pain they were experiencing. It was simply too familiar. Shut up. The door of a room in the courtyard opened, and an old man with white hair and beard glared at the two of them. Both of you stay there obediently. He didn't seem to care about the status of the two of them. It could be said that there weren't many people in the imperial court who had a higher status than them. Tong Jingye and Qin Chuan immediately stood at the side and stared at each other, but they were very obedient. Principal Ren, you have been watching for a long time. What are you here for? Ren Baqin suddenly heard Qin Chuan's malicious voice. Haha, I just have nothing to do. Ren Baqin laughed and revealed himself as he strolled. Qin Chuan and Tong Jingye immediately focused their attention on Ren Baqin's movements. Speaking of which, I haven't been to this clinic for a long time. The air here is still good. Ren Baqin laughed and turned to leave. He was afraid that these two old bastards would know what was wrong with him. Since they knew which courtyard it was, things would be easy. He could just come back later. Since you are here, just wait there quietly. I don't have the mood to suffer from the same illness several times. The old man in the courtyard glanced at Ren Baqin, observed his walking posture, and then said faintly, I'm really fine. Ren Baqin turned around and smiled. This is actually a misunderstanding. In that case, don't look for me later. I'm going out to gather herbs, the old man immediately said. Ren Baqin thought about it. Was treatment more important or his reputation more important? No matter how he thought about it, he felt that his reputation was more important, but he just couldn't take a step forward. Looking at the old man's attitude toward Tong Jingye and Qin Chuan and their reactions, Ren Baqin really believed that the old man wouldn't care about him. Then the scene became the two people in the courtyard and the one at the door. The three of them stared at each other. I didn't expect both of you to be here at the same time. Ren Baqin laughed and tried to resolve the awkward atmosphere. I also didn't expect Sir Ren to appear here. Qin Chuan's eyes were like copper bells as he laughed mischievously. He still remembered what happened last time. The thing that Ren Baqin took out made him want to die for a period of time. Sir Ren and I have always been fated. Tonight, let's go to Misty Cloud Restaurant and have 3 big bowls of wine. Tong Jingye immediately tried to rope in his comrade. I have booked Misty Cloud Restaurant today. Old man, you should wait for me to leave before drinking the leftovers. Qin Chuan immediately turned his head and sneered. Old man, your buttocks are still bleeding. Do you want to dye Misty Cloud Restaurant with blood? I'm afraid that in the next year, all the brothels in Lan City will spread the story of the Minister of War. Tong Jingye's gaze didn't leave Qin Chuan's lower body like a knife. It's just a small arrow wound. Qin Chuan didn't seem to care. I wonder which expert shot your buttocks with an arrow. I have to treat him to a good drink. Tong Jingye retorted sarcastically. If you have nothing to do, why don't you take a few steps and take a look? Qin Chuan didn't show any mercy with his words. Rinpoche sighed and watched the two of them bickering. He felt that he was unlucky. Firstly, he was unlucky to have contracted this illness. Secondly, he was unlucky to have met these two fellows. After waiting for the time it took to drink 2 cups of tea, the door to the previous room was opened again. Shi Qing walked out with a refreshed look on his face. So it's the 3 of you. I'll take my leave first. Shi Qing looked at the 3 of them with a strange look, cupped his fists, and walked away with a majestic gait. The 3 of you come in. The old man extended his head and beckoned the 3 of them in. He first reached out and pressed on each of their shoulders before slapping their buttocks. When he saw their eyebrows twitching, he immediately knew that he was right. Take off your clothes, the old man said. Ah. Rinpoche looked at the other 2 old men. Even though he had been to public bathhouses since he was young, he couldn't face these 2 old men openly in the same room. The 3 of you go inside. The old man pointed inside. Rinpoche then noticed that there were actually a few areas separated by cloth. The 3 of them each found a place and started to take off their clothes. The old man called out from outside, Zhongqing, bring 3 basins of ice water over. Then he stretched his head to see that the 3 of them were naked and said, stand upside down with both hands on the ground. Rinpoche was now at the mercy of others. He stood upside down with both hands on the ground and muttered in his heart whether this old man was reliable or not. Not long after, someone came in. Then a basin of ice water was poured on Rinpoche's body. Rinpoche's body immediately quivered. It was really ice water. Rinpoche could feel the ice shards hitting his body. The temperature was definitely below 10 degrees Celsius. He immediately let out a strange cry and somersaulted in the air before landing on the ground. Then his heart tightened. However, he realized that the pain he expected didn't come. There was only a very slight pain and it wasn't a big deal. He reached out and touched it. Was gone? Was it all right? It was stimulated by the ice water just now and shrank back. After a while, the 3 of them cupped their fists and expressed their gratitude in a refreshed manner. Before Rinpoche went out, he scanned the ground and found 4 empty basins on the ground. After leaving the courtyard, Tong Jingye waved at Rinpoche with a relaxed expression and said, Sir Rin, that old man is pitiful. I won't fight with him today. Tomorrow I'll treat you to a meal at Yenyun restaurant. Qin Chuan walked over to Tong Jingye in high spirits and called for his followers to ride away. His wild laughter could still be heard from afar. Chapter 604. Where's Rinpoche? The Empress was bored out of her mind and went out for some fresh air. The sky had just darkened, but the palace was brightly lit. He was invited to House Yunyan by Minister Tong. He came to inform Her Majesty just now, Hong Yuan whispered as he followed behind Rinpoche while carrying the Empress's wine pot. Oh. The Empress thought for a while. Rinpoche did come by just now, but she was watching a television drama and didn't pay much attention. After thinking for a while, the Empress said, that old man. He brought him to House Yunyan again. Sir Rin knows his limits. Hong Yuan pursed her lips and smiled. Men are all cats, there's no one who doesn't cheat. The Empress thought of a common saying in television dramas and blurted it out. Your Majesty, do you want to go and take a look? Qing Yuan instigated with a mischievous smile. She actually liked the scene of the Empress tormenting Principal Ren. The Empress, who was walking out, stopped in her tracks and revealed a trace of excitement on her face. However, another saying from television dramas came to mind, don't push men too hard, give them some space. Then another saying came to mind, don't give men the chance to cheat. After struggling for a while, the Empress smiled. Why was she thinking about this? Since when did she have to consider the thoughts of these street kids? I'm Cheesy Xiao. If anyone in this world let me down, I'll hang him on top of the city wall to dry and then suppress him in the palace square to accompany the Eru spirit. I don't think he has the guts, the Empress said coldly. Furthermore, Rinpoche couldn't always be around her in the palace. It wasn't a bad thing for him to interact more with the people from the Ministry of Works. She still trusted Rinpoche. After finishing her sentence, the Empress turned around and walked into the palace. I'm bored. Change into men's clothes and go to the brothel to have some fun. At this moment, Rinpoche had a strange look on his face in House Yunyan. He couldn't tell if it was playful, pitiful, or something else. The hall was full of officials from the Ministry of Works, including Feng Ho and Gui Hong. Even though they weren't unrestrained, they were still dancing like demons. Other than Rinpoche, there was no one on either side of him. He was just drinking and casually chatting with everyone about the recent developments. For example, the blast furnaces and hydraulic forging workshops on the banks of the 19 River in the south, and the promotion of crops such as potatoes and pumpkins in the coming year. He always wanted to look at the development of Daeyo's agriculture and industry from a higher perspective so that he could make plans. However, the group of women who came in just now surprised him, because he saw a familiar face among them. She was a young girl in her 20s. She was 28, not 28. His appearance could be considered excellent, with fair skin and a slightly broad forehead. His appearance carried a heroic spirit. After putting on some makeup, she looked much more gentle and charming. He was dressed in the traditional aqua blue clothing of the Jing tribe. There were many flowery embroidery on his clothes, and he wore a few silver rings on his wrists. This batch of women was sent from Tianjing Basin. After Shi Huanya pacified Tianjing Basin, he selected some young women from the relatives of the prisoners and sent them to these brothels in Lan City. As for those in the house of House Yunyan, they were the best of the best. They had just been trained, and today was the first time they were sent out to receive guests. As soon as he entered the house of House Yunyan, he heard about this from Feng Ho, but he didn't pay much attention to it. It wasn't until this batch of women came in that he saw the girl among them that he was stunned for a moment and even suspected if they looked alike. It wasn't until he saw the astonishment, shyness, and hatred in the girl's eyes that he confirmed that it was indeed her. He had forgotten the name, but he remembered the person. Back in the hidden village, apart from the experts from the old sect, there were also some of their disciples. This girl was one of them. If he remembered correctly, her master was an old woman who later invited a spirit wheel expert who used a paper umbrella as a weapon and executed a stunning spear attack. Rinpochen still remembered that the expert's name was Chang Tian. After Chang Tian's death, the old woman disappeared with his corpse, and Rinpochen had forgotten about her. After all, a peak earth wheel expert wasn't worth his attention in that situation. He didn't expect to see her disciple here. "Where's your master?" Rinpochen asked. The girl hesitated for a while, then sighed and said, "Dead." "Why are you here?" What Rinpochen actually wanted to ask was why she was still alive. He had a good impression of the people from the hidden village. At the very least, they were a group of people who bled for their ideals. He would rather hope that the people from the hidden village surrendered or died than to see such a girl fall into a place like a brothel and become a doll. However, when the words were on the tip of his tongue, Rinpochen felt that he shouldn't be so harsh. Not everyone had the opportunity to make such a choice. It wasn't wrong to want to live. "There's actually someone you know." Feng Ho laughed heartily and patted Rinpochen's shoulder. Rinpochen immediately felt the chair beneath him creak. "Do you want to ask me why I didn't die with my master?" The girl raised her eyebrows as if she understood the meaning behind Rinpochen's words. She then said with hatred, "That was what I thought at first, but now I want to live and see how those traitors die and how you all perish." As soon as she said this, the surroundings became quiet. Everyone present looked at her with a faint smile. In Lan City, even spirit wheel experts couldn't leave even if they entered. Moreover, a man wheel expert was no different from an ordinary child. No one cared about her. However, her thoughts determined her fate. The others who had the same status as her all distanced themselves in fear. They lowered their heads and didn't dare to say anything. "I will take her away in a while. I will let you live peacefully and watch." Feng Ho smiled and decided the girl's fate with one sentence. "If you want to live, you shouldn't say such words. Do you still want to die? Or is your heart wavering between living in humiliation and death? You have been trained in House Yunyan for 3 months and still haven't understood. Even after 3 months of training, you still haven't figured it out." Rinpochen shook his head. The girl bit her lip and stared at Rinpochen stubbornly. "Don't take her away. I will handle it." Rinpochen turned his head and said to Feng Ho. If Feng Ho took her away, even if he didn't kill her, he wouldn't let her have an easy time. To these people she wasn't even comparable to a doll. If her legs were to be chopped off and tied up in the courtyard, she might as well be killed. "If Her Majesty finds out, I'm afraid you will be in trouble." Feng Ho laughed. "Her Majesty won't care about such a small matter." Rinpochen waved his hand and asked the guards to take the girl to another room. In one of the rooms, Xing Rong, who was missing an arm and an eye, was sitting. "The principal of Black Bamboo Academy, Rinpochen, is here. This time he wants to take away someone who seems to be an acquaintance," a man with a crippled body said from below. "He is here again?" Xing Rong frowned. "The last time he was here, half of House Yunyan was almost demolished." "Minister Tong again?" After thinking about it, only Tong Jinya was fearless enough to invite him to the brothel. "Yes." He wants the person sure, but he has to leave the money behind. Get someone to tell him that it's 500 taels of silver, Xing Rong said after some thought. After a while, someone came in and reported, just now 3 women dressed as men came and one of them looks like Her Majesty. Xing Rong's face darkened when he heard this. Why is Her Majesty here again? Chapter 605. Xing Rong thought for a while and said, regardless of whether she is Her Majesty or not, treat her as an ordinary guest. He was almost certain that the other party was Her Majesty. The last time Rinpoche came to House Yunyan, it was Her Majesty who came to make trouble. This time, Rinpoche was followed by a woman dressed as a man who looked like Her Majesty. There was no doubt about it. They want to go to House Yunyan. Let them go. Let them go wherever they want to go. After a while, another report came in and said, they chose the upper hall next to Minister Tong. They also want girls. Xing Rong stroked his head with his remaining hand and said, serve them good wine and food. Also find a few girls who know etiquette and propriety. After his subordinate left, Xing Rong sighed. He was exhausted. He wasn't tired at first, but now he was. Sir, Minister Qin has brought some people to House Yunyan and wants to go to the Cloud Hall next to Minister Tong, someone reported shortly after. Xing Rong rubbed his nose. Normally he wouldn't be willing to go because Qin Xuan and Tong Jingye would definitely fight if they met. However, it didn't matter today. There was someone more powerful upstairs. As long as he didn't anger that person, the others could do whatever they wanted. Rinpoche didn't care anymore after sending someone to take the girl away. Whether she lived or died in the future, it was better than leaving her here. Even if she was killed, it would be straightforward. After all, with her identity and the things that her master had been working hard for, he didn't want to see her being treated like this here. Even though he didn't even remember her name. This matter was only a small interlude, so it naturally wouldn't be taken seriously by everyone present. Sir Ren, drink. You and I are fated to meet each other at the doctor's office and have the same illness. Tong Jingye laughed and poured wine for Rinpoche. Rinpoche's face darkened. Could he not mention this? It was painful to think about it. Sir Tong and Sir Ren are sick? Feng Ho raised his head and asked with a smile while carrying a girl in his arms. It's nothing. It's just a small problem, Rinpoche quickly replied. He was afraid of being questioned, but he couldn't say it because it was too embarrassing. Fortunately, Tong Jingye didn't seem to want to publicize this matter, so he kept quiet. Drink. After 3 rounds of wine, Gui Hong pushed Feng Ho away and moved closer to Rinpoche. Sir Ren, when are you going to take out the cotton that you mentioned previously? Dayo doesn't lack fabric to ward off the cold. Even though cotton can be woven, it's not as important as filling one's stomach. At the very least, Dayo doesn't have to worry about food before we talk about cotton. Rinpoche shook his head. That's true, but Sir Ren, don't forget that even though you don't need to keep out the cold, it's still very hot to wear a leather coat. Many people have heat rashes, especially the Aborigines. If they could have cheap cloth, that would be great, and it would also be of great benefit to the common people. A few days ago, the potatoes, pumpkins, and sweet potatoes were also harvested. Today was the 3rd harvest, and the total harvest of the 3 was more than 10 million caddies. Right now, they are being transported everywhere. This old man has already given the order that every city must plant the crops according to the requirements. Once the crops are harvested, it will be 100 times, 1,000 times more. This plant could be planted 3 times a year. Even if a portion of it was used for food and the rest was distributed to be planted, there would be no need to worry about food shortage after a year. Sir Ren can take out the cotton for breeding and cultivation first. Gui Hong explained to Rinpoche clearly. He had all these things in mind and he had finally caught Rinpoche. If that's the case, wait for a few days. I will bring the cotton seeds and the planting method over, Rinpoche said after some thought. What about the method of making wine? After Rinpoche finished speaking, Tong Jingye immediately put his arm around Rinpoche's shoulder and almost pulled him into his embrace. Rinpoche quickly shrunk back and escaped. Don't think about the method of making wine for now. It won't be too late to talk about it when the imperial family has enough food to make wine at will, Rinpoche immediately said. That ballista made of springs last time isn't bad either. Feng Ho looked over. Rinpoche's face darkened. It wasn't easy to drink with them. Don't even think about it. Even if I told you, you wouldn't be able to make it, and even if you did, you wouldn't be able to use it. Moreover, the front line is doing well now. Under the command of the walkie-talkie, The soldiers are moving like water, gathering and dispersing at will. Regardless of whether it's a long-range attack or a sudden attack, they can catch the enemy off guard. In terms of individual strength, the Aboriginals are much stronger than the soldiers of the Yun Nation, so we have a huge advantage. Making a bunch of ballistas will instead slow down the speed of the army. If Sir Ren can take out the method of making that small ball, then we don't have to worry about this anymore. Feng Ho laughed. The Ministry of Works had been coveting the method of making grenades for a long time. Unfortunately, Ren Bachien had already said that it couldn't be made. They still believed what he said. Have you found the rubber that I want? Ren Bachien turned his head and looked over. I have news that there is something similar to what you mentioned near the border of the Qin Nation. I have already sent someone to retrieve it. However, even with Her Majesty's order, you can't monopolize this thing, Tang Jingye said. This thing is very useful. Let's see if it meets the requirements first. If it's the kind that I want, it can make a lot of useful things, Ren Bachien said. Rubber had a wide range of uses, and it wasn't only used for hot air balloons. It could be used for sealing, shock absorption, manufacturing, and many other things. Regardless of its usefulness or value, it could be said to be huge. When the time came, it would be a small matter to give some things to the Ministry of Works. For example, rubber tires and shock absorption for carriages. Although these things could make money, they weren't important to him. However, they were very useful to the Ministry of Works and could be handed over. He could also use rubber as an insulator to wrap the electric wires. As long as there were electric wires, more aspects could be put on the agenda. Good. Principal Ren is indeed not a stingy person. Tang Jingye immediately laughed. As long as it was something that Ren Bachien had, it would be very useful. Good job, Sir Qin. Give us another jar. Suddenly, a burst of laughter and jeering came from next door. Tang Jingye's laughter immediately stopped and his eyebrows raised. It's Lian Liang from the Department of War, Feng Ho said as his ears twitched. Let's drink and ignore them. Tang Jingye's expression relaxed slightly. He could naturally tell that it was someone from the Ministry of War. However, he had important matters to discuss today and wasn't in the mood to care about them. In fact, Tang Jingye wanted to ask Ren Bachien about those street lamps in the palace, but Her Majesty didn't explain. The officials were speculating non-stop, and someone had to come out and say something. Although they could suppress it, they couldn't suppress the situation for a while. Even the ministers of the 6 ministries had some complaints. In other words, on account of their past friendship, he wanted to warn Ren Bachien. No matter what, he shouldn't let Her Majesty be too extravagant. This way Ren Bachien could stand firm. Otherwise, no matter how much Her Majesty liked him, there would be trouble sooner or later if she criticized him too much. How did the Hao Nation fall back then? Why did the Aboriginals rebel? If it weren't for the Hao Nation's emperor's extravagance and dissipation, would there have been such a thing? These people hadn't forgotten. This was his main purpose this time. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of someone smashing the wall came from next door, causing Tang Jingye's eyes to bulge like copper bells. His eyes were overflowing with murderous intent. Chapter 606. Ha, Sir Qin is still as good as ever. I'll let you see if my knife is still sharp. The wild laughter from next door caused the entire house Yunyan to tremble. In particular, he didn't know which bastard was laughing maniacally and hammering the wall. Ren Bachien watched as the dust from the beam fell into his cup. Tang Jingye's face darkened at first, then he restrained himself and shouted, "Drink, chop people with a big knife, drink in big mouthfuls and sing loudly. This is what an Aboriginal man should be like." Sir Tang is right. Feng Ho was the first to respond. He was practically shouting at the top of his lungs. Then the voices in the hall suddenly became louder. Gui Hong was banging on the table, and Ren Bachien saw that the stone slabs under the table had cracked. The entire room was filled with the cries of a few boorish men, and even the voices of the women couldn't be heard. The voices from next door first stopped, then suddenly became enthusiastic, once again suppressing the voices of Tang Jingye and the others. How could Tang Jingye tolerate this? His expression didn't change and his voice was raised again. Ha ha ha. The voices of the people from the Ministry of Works increased by 5 decibels. Ha! The voices of the people from the Ministry of War increased by 5 decibels. Ha! The voices of the people from the Ministry of War increased by 5 decibels. Ha! The voices of the people from the Ministry of War increased again. In less than half an hour, The entire House Yunyan was filled with people from the two rooms competing with each other in volume. Renbaqian covered his ears and looked at Tong Jingye with a flushed face as he laughed wildly at the top of his lungs. The veins on his neck were popping out. Ngui Hong, your voice is already broken. Your voice is like a broken gong. You're about to suffocate, yet you're still laughing? I'm really worried that you'll fall down in the next second. Feng Ho, can you stop hammering the wall? Can't you see that the wall is already cracked? If you continue hammering, House Yunyan will probably become a thing of the past. That would really be worthy of its name. The people on the entire street outside were looking in the direction of House Yunyan. The voices from House Yunyan almost covered half the street, and people in other places had to shout at the top of their lungs. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to hear it in one room. Then after asking around they found out that Qin Xuan and Tong Jingye were inside. All of them looked embarrassed. They didn't know when these two lords would stop when they met. Xing Rong got up and pushed open the window. The moonlight outside the window spilled into the room that was always dark, followed by the noise from House Yunyan. Sir, those two are fighting again, someone behind him said. Let them be, Xing Rong said indifferently. If it was in the past he would naturally think of a way, but there was no need for that today. Next to Renbaqian, the Empress, who was dressed in black and had her hair combed into a great Xia scholar's bun, had a gloomy expression on her face. Initially, going to a brothel was something new. However, not long after she sat down, she heard a commotion from next door. Then the commotion got louder and louder. Both parties seemed to be competing to see who had the loudest voice. It was simply demonic, causing the corners of her eyes to twitch. Subconsciously, she grabbed the table with her fingers and sent sawdust flying. She couldn't wait to jump out and give each of them a kick. However, after thinking that she was seeking pleasure and visiting incognito, the Empress endured it. However, her expression remained very ugly. Beside the Empress, there were two smiling ladies with outstanding temperaments accompanying her. However, the two of them couldn't smile anymore. They wanted to cover their ears a few times, but they didn't dare to. Not far from the Empress, Qin Yuan and Hong Luan, who were dressed up as charming young men, had been taking advantage of the young lady beside them ever since they entered the room. That young lady didn't seem to mind. Instead, her eyes were filled with amusement. Even without a discerning eye, one could tell that these three charming young men were women dressed up as men. In Lan City, when one opened the window and looked into the room, one would see burly men everywhere. Where did these three charming young men come from? In particular, these two smelled of cosmetics. At this moment, Qin Yuan stopped her groping, turned to the Empress and said, "Young master, it's too noisy." The Empress raised her eyebrows and used her eyes to ask, "What are you talking about?" Qin Yuan replied, "It's too noisy." The Empress replied, "I can't hear you." Hong Luan looked at the two of them and asked, "What are you talking about?" The Empress and Qin Yuan looked at Hong Luan and used their eyes to ask, "What did you say?" Boom. The wall that had been continuously destroyed by Feng Ho was finally broken. The people at the two tables in the two halls looked at each other. "So, it's the old man here," Tong Jingye and Qin Xuan said in unison. "Old man, who are you talking about?" Tong Jingye repeated the same trick. "Old man, you." As usual, Qin Xuan stepped into the same pit. "I was wondering why it's so smelly today. Old man, are you here to stain House Yunyan with blood?" Tong Jingye laughed wildly. One had to hit someone's face and scold someone's shortcomings. It's better than a woman like you who walks with your buttocks between your legs. Qin Xuan stood up and looked at Tong Jingye. "Come here, I'll let you see who's the woman." "Why, do you want to try the sharpness of my knife again?" "Good, good, good. It just so happens that I've made some progress recently and want to see if you have made any progress." Tong Jingye slammed the table in front of him, which immediately shattered. Before Tong Jingye raised his hand, Renbaqian snatched a plate of peanut-like dried fruits and hid in a corner, eating peanuts while waiting to watch the show. As for the others, they stared at each other and used their gazes to kill each other. Whenever Tong Jingye and Qin Xuan met, they would act like this. It was as if they were fighting cocks, and the relationship between the two departments wasn't good. "Come, I'm afraid of breaking things if we fight here. Let's go to the roof and have a spar." Tong Jingye ignored the smashed walls and tables and forgot what he wanted to say to Renbaqian. He and Qin Xuan ran to the roof to fight. After the two of them left, the others followed them to the roof. Renbaqian looked left and right, then out of the window. It was 3 stories high and there was no place for him to stand on. He couldn't go up. To be a spectator, one had to be skilled. Otherwise, they wouldn't even have a chance to watch. "Shoo!" Renbaqian shouted. Jianghu, who was waiting outside, immediately came in, carried Rinpoche to the roof and put him down. Rinpoche's drunkenness was blown away by the wind, and he felt even more dizzy. The so-called feeling of sobering up after being blown away by the wind was nonsense. There was a saying that went, "You'll faint when you see the wind." Rinpoche shook his head. Just as he composed himself and tried to find where the two of them were, he heard a loud boom. The two of them broke the roof and fought to the ground below. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A group of figures flashed past. Rinpoche and Jianghu were the only ones left on the roof, enjoying the cold wind with the plate of peanuts in his arms. Awkward, he had just come up but the other party had already gone down. How awkward was this? Rinpoche simply lay on the roof, enjoying the night wind, and looked at the moon above his head. Jianghu, don't you think that thing on the big moon looks like an eye? Rinpoche asked drunkenly after looking at it for a long time. At this time there was a red moon and a much smaller moon hanging high in the sky. In the center of the red moon, there was something that looked like an eye, as if it was watching everyone who was looking at the sky. However, this wasn't something that could be seen all the time. The last time Rinpoche saw it was a long time ago, and he had forgotten about it after not seeing it again. Now he suddenly saw it again on this night. Boom, boom. Tong Jingye and Qin Xuan suddenly flew out of the house Yunyan and disappeared into the night. The entire house Yunyan was shaking and creaking as if it was about to collapse. "Sir, be careful." Jianghu's expression suddenly changed. He grabbed Rinpoche and was about to run. Boom. Crash. House Yunyan let out a creaking sound that made people's teeth ache and suddenly collapsed. After a cloud of dust, the people from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of War landed in the courtyard obediently. "Your Majesty." Just now, when Tong Jingye and Qin Xuan were fighting, they broke through the wall and went into another hall. When they saw the few people in the hall, everyone was dumbfounded. No one expected the Empress to be here. The Empress's face darkened as she kicked each of them out. Looking at the crowd at this moment, the Empress snorted and disappeared into the moonlight in a flash. After the Empress left, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. "Why is Her Majesty here?" Feng Ho sighed. "To catch an adulterous couple." Gui Hong hit the nail on the head. "Where's Principal Ren?" "I didn't see him." "Don't tell me he saw Her Majesty hiding?" "I'm here." Rinpoche crawled out of the ruins with his face covered in dirt. It was still the same room. "Sir, House Yunyan has collapsed. Send the bill to the Tong and Qin residences tomorrow." "It was Her Majesty who demolished it." "Send the bill to the Tong and Qin residences tomorrow." "Got it." After his subordinates retreated, Xing Rong sighed and felt tired. He would have rather been wielding a knife and chopping people in the Protectorate of the North. Unfortunately, Xing Rong touched his remaining eye and looked at his only hand, which was missing 2 fingers. Chapter 607. I heard that you asked for a woman from a brothel? Do you want to learn how to keep a mistress in your house? The Empress asked casually the next day. Your Majesty is well informed. Rinpoche gave her a thumbs up and praised her. The Empress glanced at him. How was this well informed? The people from the hidden village felt that she shouldn't be in a place like a brothel. I sent someone to send her to Qingyun's sword. That's why I said that you are keeping a mistress in your house. You deliberately sent her to a place that's neither too far nor too close, and I can't be bothered with her, the Empress said. Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Your Majesty, you have been watching too much television. She was buried in House Yunyan last night. There are several wounds on her face and I'm afraid that she is disfigured. How can I keep a mistress in my house? You still can't forget her even though she is disfigured. I didn't misjudge you. You don't just look at a person's appearance. The Empress continued. Rinpoche was speechless. Your Majesty, are you praising me? Also, you aren't going to reason with me today, right? Rinpoche felt that the ancient saying, reasoning with a woman is stupid. This saying was simply too reasonable. But why did your Majesty go to House Yunyan? Rinpoche still didn't remember that he was buried in House Yunyan yesterday because the Empress kicked Qin Xuan and Tong Jingye away and then destroyed the pillars of House Yunyan. I want to know why that place is so attractive to you, the Empress said casually. How is it attractive? I was just accompanying Minister Tong to drink and chat. However, I'm curious, what conclusion did your Majesty reach? New people are better than old clothes. The Empress sighed softly. Rinpoche immediately felt embarrassed. Your Majesty, you are indeed here to find trouble today. Also, is it appropriate to say such words with such a cold and aloof face? Your Majesty, even if you want to pretend to be a resentful woman, you don't look like one. He immediately cautiously said, Your Majesty, let's watch less television in the future and deal more with court affairs. The Empress immediately raised her eyebrows and squinted at him. You will get beaten up. Your Majesty, violence can't solve any problems. Ren Baqin said righteously. But it can solve the problem of the person. The Empress sneered. Ren Baqin thought about it and sighed. Your Majesty, you are right. The Water Empress was satisfied. She glanced at him and said softly, If you can defeat me, I will listen to you. Then he became cold again. But you can't beat me, so listen to me. Ren Baqin, what can I say? Your Majesty is far-sighted and wise. You can see through the surface and see the core. You are indeed extraordinary. Cut it out. The Empress snorted softly. It was quite fun to bully Ren Baqin when he had nothing to do. Then he got down to business. The auxiliary troops have already started to head back and have just left the Yin nation. This time they brought back a lot of things they had plundered from various cities. There was also a batch of captives, about 100,000 people. It is estimated that we will reach Lan City in a month. Ren Baqin's spirits were lifted. The Aboriginals weren't like the other nations or ancient China. They didn't have auxiliary armies. The auxiliary army that the Empress mentioned was the militia. Previously, many militias were transferred from various cities to the Yun nation to transport the looted supplies after the city was breached. These supplies were used to transfuse Dayo's blood with Dayo. These were the supplies that were being transported this time. At the same time, the large batch of captives was also very important, especially for the expansion of the cement and brick factories, as well as the construction of roads. I will discuss this with Sir Tong. Go and meet Tuan. The provisions that these people need will also have to be transported from the Ministry of Revenue, the Empress said. Understood. Ren Baqin nodded. In the past, the Empress would directly issue orders for such matters, but now she was letting Ren Baqin coordinate it himself. This was probably a change. Although it seemed more troublesome, it also meant that Ren Baqin wasn't completely relying on the Empress anymore. That day, Ren Baqin wasn't in a hurry to do anything and first went back to Earth. The others were in the villa, and only the 2 winged cavalry warriors hadn't returned yet. It had been 12 days and even the Lantern Festival was almost over. There were still no traces of these 2 people. Ren Baqin called Yang Sen and calmly asked, Minister Yang, 2 of my subordinates have gone missing. Have you found them? Yang Sen had been waiting for this call, but he almost vomited blood when he heard the content of the call. Your subordinates are missing? Have we found them? Who would dare to find your bear-like subordinates? Also, why did you look for us first when you lost your subordinates? Why do you lose your subordinates every year? Do you think this is a kindergarten? Yang Sen gritted his teeth and asked. Haha, I'm just afraid of causing you trouble. Ren Baqin laughed. If you don't want to cause us trouble, don't let your people run around. Yang Sen gulped down his tea on the other end of the call. After the call, Ren Baqin was a little speechless. The last time, the 2 winged cavalry warriors went to Third Fatty's place. This time, the 2 winged cavalry warriors seemed to have studied the route in advance. They actually followed the previous route and ran all the way to Nan Dynasty. Then there was still chaos along the way. The last time, the 2 winged cavalry warriors destroyed a few drug dens and baths, causing the entire city to be wiped out by the police. Those who were lucky enough to escape weren't able to escape this time. After being tossed around by the winged cavalry and then being wiped out by the police, the 3 cities along the route were really cleaned up. When Ren Baqin made the call, Yang Sen was also having a headache because the 2 winged cavalry warriors were wanted by the police in Nan Dynasty and were on the run. Even if Ren Baqin didn't make the call, Yang Sen had to find a way to get these 2 people back. The nation would never allow them to fall into foreign hands. After all, the stakes were too high. Even a little bit of information would be a huge loss. However, these 2 people weren't dolls and wouldn't be manipulated by others. The personnel outside tried to contact them several times, but they couldn't even touch their shadows. With the strength of the winged cavalry warriors and their understanding of Earth over the past year, it was like fish in the sea when they were scattered into the city. It was really too difficult to catch them. As a last resort, Ren Baqin sent 2 more people to Yang Sen to help bring the 2 people back. Ren Baqin personally sent the 2 winged cavalry warriors to the Messier 87 department and replaced them with 2 more. Of course, he couldn't let go of such an opportunity to go out and broaden his horizons. Rinpoche tried his best to let each of the winged cavalry warriors have a better understanding of Earth. If they were still at the novice learning stage in the past, they should be out of the novice village now. Director Yang, I'll have to trouble you this time. These two people will follow you. With them around, you should be able to find those two people, Rinpoche said as he brought the two people to the Messier 87 department. He was very confident that these winged cavalry warriors had lived together for a long time and had a good understanding of other people's thoughts and habits. Furthermore, these two were good at tracking in the mountains. Although the mountains weren't quite the same as the cities, there were certain similarities. Xiongzhan. Xionging. Rinpoche said. Lady boss, what's the matter? The two men who were 1.8 meters tall and weighed more than 150 kilograms, had ferocious faces, but looked somewhat similar and were laughing and joking. The next second Rinpoche's foot landed on their legs. It's second boss. Do whatever others say these days. Don't get into trouble and bring those two bastards back. Rinpoche said. Although he knew that these two definitely wouldn't behave themselves, he still had to put on an act. Chapter 608. We'll set off tomorrow morning. I'll arrange a room for you to rest later. If you have any requests, feel free to let me know. After Rinpoche left, Yang Sen looked at the two burly men in front of him. Even though this wasn't his first time seeing them, Yang Sen could still feel the pressure from them. It wasn't because of their identities but because of their strength. Just like ordinary people facing tigers and other wild beasts at close range, they would always be somewhat frightened. However, Yang Sen concealed it very well and no one could see it. Can I let you know if I have any requests? Xiongzhan looked down at Yang Sen who was sitting behind the table. Yes, as long as it's within my capabilities. Yang Sen smiled. He actually hoped to build a good relationship with these people. Although it seemed very difficult at the moment, there was always a way. Xiongzhan and Xionging looked at each other and laughed. You're a good person. Of course. Yang Sen smiled. Do you have women? Xiongzhan asked. What? Yang Sen was stunned. Women. I haven't seen a woman for more than a year. Xiongzhan said seriously. Yang Sen's face darkened. You're really impolite. I really don't have that. Not even a woman. Xiongzhan and Xionging were a little disappointed. Yang Sen's face darkened even more. What do you think I am? A pimp? I'm a civil servant after all. That white powder that makes you feel like you're walking on clouds after inhaling it? Do you have that? The two of them lowered their demands and looked at Yang Sen with bright eyes. Those two idiots were fooled like this last time, but it was completely useless. Later on, they heard from Ding Jie that there was such a thing, and they thought that if they tasted it they could go back and show it off. Not either. Yang Sen's face twitched. You want women and poison. What else do you want? Not even this? The two of them didn't hide their disdain. If you don't have this and that, what else do you want us to mention? Yang Sen was completely speechless. Did I ask you to mention these things? Can't you make some normal demands? For example, good wine and meat. Then there should be good wine and meat, right? Xiongzhan lowered his demands again. He thought that if they didn't have this, he would just go back and stay for the night. That's possible. Yang Sen sighed. Originally, he still wanted to form a good relationship with these two people and find an opportunity to fish out some information in the future. For the time being, he gave up on this idea. After asking someone to take the two away, Yang Sen thought for a moment, then made a phone call and waited in the office. In the evening, a car stopped in front of the Messier 87. 3 people got out, 2 men and a woman. One of the men had a square face and was tall. He was dressed in a tang suit and looked quite dignified. The other man, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. He was thin with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks. No matter how you looked at him, he looked more like a monkey than a human. However, he had a vigorous aura about him and his eyes shone brightly. The woman's appearance was average. Her chin was slightly raised and she seemed very arrogant. The 3 of them were led to Yang Sen's office by the staff. Minister Yang. The 3 of them stood at attention and raised their hands in a military salute. Baiyuha Lei Gong Zhaoyu. Yang Sen smiled and called out their names one by one. He was very familiar with these 3 people. In particular, Baiyuha had trained hard for many years and found a way to break through the limit to reach the level of those masters in history. Unfortunately, he had already provided the secret manuals to the nation, and a group of people had already reached the manual level. Then he, a genius, almost ended up like Wang Chongyang. He had just come out of seclusion and shouted, "I'm the best in the world. before being smashed to death by a flying shoe. Although he wasn't smashed to death, he wasn't much better off. He had spent so much energy thinking that he had become the best in the world. In the end, he realized that the streets were full of people with the same level of strength, and he almost went back to farming. Later on, he was taken away by the state. After all, he was the only one who studied the ancient books and deduced a way to break through the limit. In terms of talent, he could already be considered a genius. After coming into contact with the secret manuals, he lived up to his expectations. In a short period of time, his strength was once again increased by a notch and he deduced many things from the secret manuals. Now he was already the best among that batch of practitioners. As for the other two, they weren't even 30 years old yet. Their strength was even more outstanding and they were also highly valued candidates. I don't know if the higher-ups have explained it to you. Let me explain it to you again. Take a seat first. Didn't you guys always want to see experts who are more powerful than you? This time you have a chance. Yang Sen's words made the eyes of the three of them light up. But don't provoke them, Yang Sen quickly said. How could that be? Lin Yu's eyes turned as she smiled. Who exactly are they? They are actually more powerful than Big Head Bai. I want to see. Bai Yuha wasn't angry when he was called Big Head Bai. His face was calm as he waited for Yang Sen's reply. They come from the same source as your secret manuals. They come from a secret place. Yang Sen warned, don't provoke them. You guys aren't on the same level as them. Furthermore, they are very murderous and have a special status. If you guys have a conflict with them, it will be very difficult for me to protect you. It's not that I can't protect you, but it's too late. Based on my observation, they are different from you guys. They don't have many restrictions and have a lawless temperament. Before I want to protect you guys will die. So powerful? Bai Yuha was astonished. More powerful than you think. Do you remember how the levels are divided? Man wheel, earth wheel, and spirit wheel. This is how they divide them. The secret manuals that you guys have learned are also divided like this. According to the division, you guys are all man wheel experts and these two are earth wheel experts. Are there really earth wheel experts? Bai Yuha looked solemn. Otherwise, where did those secret manuals come from? Yang Sen asked. Seeing that they were about to ask, he waved his hand and said, don't ask too much. When the opportunity is right in the future, you guys will know. Remember, everything related to them is confidential. In the future, besides reporting to me and Lieutenant General Shen Ning, you guys are not allowed to divulge anything. Otherwise, you will be punished according to the crime of divulging important national secrets. The three of them were awed after hearing this. Yang Sen then took out 3 books and handed them over. These are the things that you need to take note of for this mission. Go back and take a look. Now I will bring you guys to meet these people. The 3 of them looked at each other with excitement in their eyes. Remember, don't provoke them. Yang Sen warned again. Among the 3 of them, Bai Yuha was fine, but Lei Gong and Zhao Yu were troublemakers in the base. It was fine to cause trouble in the base, but if they were to look for trouble now, they would die. Yang Sen brought the 3 of them to a room in the building. After pushing open the door, they saw that the room was filled with wine bottles and a roasted suckling pig that had already been eaten clean. Sitting in the room were 2 huge, ferocious-looking men who were playing a finger-guessing game. Little bee. Fly among the flowers. Fly. Fly. Boom. One of them slapped out like lightning and the other person smashed through the wall and crashed into another room. Then that person ran back to shake off the dust on his body as if nothing had happened. The 2 of them continued, little bee. Fly among the flowers. Fly. Boom. This time the other person was sent flying. This time he flew even further away. The sound of the slap on the face was simply painful. The 4 people at the door stood there with an embarrassed look on their faces. Looking at the walls on both sides, they had long been removed. The walls of the rooms next to each other had also been removed. At a glance they could see 3 or 4 rooms. Chapter 609. One look was enough to tell how strong these 2 people were. Although they couldn't see the bottom, they knew they were definitely stronger than them. And they were several stories taller than the building. With that speed, a slap would be as fast as lightning. And their ability to resist attacks was even better than a tortoise's. It wasn't impossible for them to punch through a wall. But that was finger guessing. It was impossible to send a person flying through several layers of walls with a slap. Could they afford to play with the things they were playing with? One slap and their brains would probably be smashed. When Lei Gong and the others saw the game the 2 were playing, they knew they couldn't afford to play, so they all quieted down. After Yang Sen greeted them, they returned to the room arranged for them and discussed for a long time. They also understood that what they had to do this time was to observe more, and learn whatever they could from the other party. At the very least they could avoid a lot of detours. The next day, everyone set off, dressed as ordinary people. This time they were going to find the two people, so they tried not to attract attention. But with Xiongzhan and Xionging, it was hard not to attract attention. The two of them were like fireflies in the dark or a pile of shit on the road. It was hard not to see them. At the airport, a girl in her early 20s curiously sized up the two of them. As a result, when Xiongzhan looked over, she was shocked and quickly grabbed her male companion's hand. Appa. The man looked at Xiongzhan and Xionging, then quickly pulled the girl away. That sissy is her father. Xiongzhan said with a serious face. I heard it too. It doesn't look like it. They look about the same age. Xionging glanced at the two of them. Maybe he ate a treasure like the jade embryo, Xiongzhan continued. Then what are we waiting for? Snatch it. When we go back and present it to Her Majesty, we'll be promoted by at least 3 ranks. Xionging looked eager. There's no hurry, Xiongzhan said. We don't know if there are any left and there are many people here. I heard them say that the people here are on the same plane as us. When we get there we'll catch up and interrogate them, Xiongzhan said. The two of them looked at each other and immediately had a plan. If it was something else, the two of them could listen to the lady boss and not cause any trouble. However, if it was a treasure like the jade embryo, then he would have to make a move. The lady boss and His Majesty would not blame the two of them. Both of them had their own thoughts. Even the excitement of flying for the first time had disappeared without a trace. When they got out of the airport, Bayuha and the others were not paying attention, and the two of them disappeared without a trace. When they turned around and found that the two people behind them were gone, and then there was no one around them, the three of them were all stunned. Even the accompanying translator was stunned. At the same time, 4 people appeared at a certain security staircase in the airport. Among them were 2 bear-like men and a man and woman who had already fainted. First, War Bear gave each of them a slap, and the two of them immediately woke up. Seeing the 2 humanoid beasts in front of him, he immediately screamed. War Bear revealed a mouthful of snow-white teeth as he smiled at the two of them. Next he smashed his fist against the wall. Cracks instantly covered the surface of the wall, nearly creating a hole. Seeing that, the two of them nearly pissed their pants. Have you ever seen a fist as big as a clay pot? Do you see it now? Do you believe that I can smash your brains with one punch? Shut up and hand over the treasure. The two of them knew a little Chinese. At least they could understand if they kept their mouths shut. Appa. The woman shrank behind the man and cried softly. She's calling for her father. Then torture her father. War Bear said to Xionging. Then he narrowed his eyes. Someone's coming. Knock them out. One of them had just pushed open the security door when he saw a bear with a raised paw in front of him. Then he fainted. 3 minutes later, War Bear asked, What are they talking about? I'll bring those people over. I think they can understand, Xionging said. At this moment, Bayuha and the others were going crazy. They had lost these 2 people before they even left the airport. When Xionging appeared, he was discovered by the 3 of them. 5 minutes later, the 4 of them who understood the situation looked at the man and woman in the corner. They didn't know what expression to show. They were cursing in their hearts, but they didn't dare to say anything. War Bear was also slightly embarrassed. Is that so? I thought this man was her father. She kept calling him father. Look at how young her father is. The 4 of them had bright expressions on their faces, but their hearts were in turmoil. Where did these 2 people come from? What is the jade embryo that they are talking about? Is there really such a thing as a treasure that can keep one young forever? When Rinpochen returned to Dayo, he watched the students study the steam engine and train engine every day. After more than a month, it finally looked like a tractor. In addition, he went to the Ministry of Works to discuss with Tong Jinye about the arrangements for the captives. First was the expansion of the cement and brick factories and the construction of 20 new ones. Next was the construction of a cement road from Lan City to the Protectorate of the Northeast. With the cement road and rubber tires, the transportation speed would be greatly increased in a short period of time. Compared to the current dirt road that would be full of mud when it rained, the transportation speed would be 2 to 3 times faster. Furthermore, the target of the cement road wasn't just the Protectorate of the Northeast. In Rinpochien's vision, the 4 protectorates of the north, south, east, and west would be connected, and even to the 60,000 mountains. Rinpochen called this plan the 10-year route plan, As for the progress, it would depend on the number of captives. If there were millions of people and the output of the cement and brick factories could keep up, it would probably be possible to connect 5 protectorates within 5 years. Even Tang Jinya and Tu Wan could see the importance of this plan, which was naturally one of the most important tasks in the next few years. Therefore the journey was smooth. Even if the Ministry of Revenue had to grit their teeth, they would squeeze out the rations that these people needed. Everyone was more optimistic about the rations. Although it was still a little tight now, in another year, the output of the crops that Rinpochen brought would be able to support the large-scale construction of Dayo using the captives. During this period he returned to Earth once and found that the winged cavalry warriors had returned safely, so he didn't ask too much. He had no idea how much trouble these people had caused and how they went to rob. If he knew, he would definitely tell them how important it was to know a foreign language. Dayo was approaching the new year. After the Empress's birthday celebration, Lan City became lively again. The residences of the officials also began to be decorated. They took out the skeletons that they had treasured and hung them on the walls. There were rows of eerie white skeletons hanging outside the walls of every house. There were humans and beasts, and they all felt that they were good opponents or prey. Whenever the wind blew, the entire Beihang district would be filled with the sound of bones rattling and a chilly wind. Especially at night, the thought of a street full of bones colliding with each other in the wind was simply like a ghost. Chapter 610. 5 days before the new year. Teacher, we have succeeded. It's moving. It's moving. Rinpochen was sitting in his room when he heard the shouts of the students coming from outside the window. Rinpochen closed the book in his hand. He had been paying attention to the progress of these students and initially thought that it would be faster. They only needed to adjust the connecting rod of the steam engine and install the wheels. He didn't expect that it would take nearly 2 months to succeed. There was a saying that there was strength in numbers, and the aboriginals were indeed very powerful. However, they were very slow on this matter. However, among so many students, there were quite a few who were holding them back, such as Tong Lan. If they were excluded, they would probably be able to succeed half a month earlier. Rinpochen could hear the cheers of many students coming from the backyard while he was still in his room. He strolled over with his hands behind his back and saw dozens of people surrounding a huge tractor. Well, it was really a tractor. Its overall appearance was very similar to the tractors that Rinpochen had seen when he was young, but it was cruder and simpler. The cylindrical steam engine was at the front with an exhaust pipe on top. At the back was an empty iron plate piled with coal. A man stood on top of it, continuously adding coal to the furnace in front. The furnace heated up the water tank, and the steam was continuously sent to the cylinder in front through the connecting pipe above. At the same time, these students also made use of the characteristics of the conversion between water and steam to make a guide pipe below the steam cylinder. The cooled water could be sent back to the water tank through the guide pipe below. As for the bottom, there were 2 large flywheels and 6 gradually shrinking flywheels. They were no longer connected by animal tendons but by metal connecting rods. When Rinpochen arrived, Du Laolu was bare-chested and covered in dust as he added coal to the furnace. It's moving, it's moving. Many students were cheering. After so long, we have finally succeeded in making a steam car that can move without manual labor. Regardless of whether it was Shirgan who had the best grades, the worst students, or the commoners, they were all excited at this moment. Even the blacksmiths and carpenters that Tong Jinya had transferred to help at the school were standing at the side with their arms crossed as they looked at their masterpiece. After all, the steam car was their blood, sweat, and tears. Get out of the way, get out of the way. The car is going to speed up. Du Laolu shouted at the crowd in front of him as he continuously added coal to the furnace. At the same time, he laughed maniacally in excitement. This is the first steam-powered car since the beginning of the world. Of course I have to drive it. Ah. Full. Tong Lan, who was sitting on a rock outside the crowd, curled her lips when she heard Du Lao's laughter. This thing can't be turned. Rinpochen, who had just arrived, heard Tong Lan's muttering. Then he looked at Du Laolu, who was standing on the steam locomotive in high spirits, and immediately revealed a look of sympathy. You caused the first traffic accident of the first steam-powered car since the beginning of the world. As the students gave way, the steam car began to accelerate. As the steam car moved forward, mud flew behind it. The wheels of the steam car left 2 trenches in the ground. Then the speed of the steam car began to increase. From a walking speed to a jogging speed, it crashed into the opposite courtyard wall. Eh? How could this thing turn? Giddy up. Seeing that the steam car had crashed into the wall, Du Laolu suddenly thought of this. He wanted to pull the reins but he couldn't find them. In his anxiety he even shouted, "Giddy up!" However, the steam car didn't budge and continued to crash into the courtyard wall. The sound of bricks collapsing could be heard as the steam car crashed into the courtyard wall and continued to move forward. The academy was located to the east of the palace and north of the Beihong district. There weren't many people in this area, and only a few imperial guards who passed by stopped in their tracks to look at the strange thing that had crashed out of the academy. It crossed the road and crashed into the courtyard wall of Great Elder Shi Qing's residence. The courtyard wall of Shi Qing's residence was made of rocks and was much sturdier than the academy's walls. The steam car, which was the result of the painstaking efforts of many students, made a loud crash when it crashed into the courtyard wall of Shi Qing's residence. There was a small dent in the wall but it didn't break through. It was as if Shi Qing had poked a hornet's nest. More than 10 burly men jumped onto the wall and glared at the murderer who dared to attack Shi Qing's residence. Du Laolu, who was covered in dirt, felt as if he was being stared at by more than 10 ferocious beasts. He broke out in a cold sweat and smiled guiltily at everyone. "It's Shurgan who made this." As he spoke he pointed behind him. A group of students was running out of the hole. "Brothers, it was an accident." Shurgan hurriedly went forward to explain. "It's the steam car that we made, but there was an accident." With Shurgan's explanation, everyone's gazes finally eased up. "Come back." Shi Qing had unknowingly appeared outside the wall and waved his hand. He looked curiously at the steam car that had crashed into the courtyard wall of his residence. "Is this the thing that you have been busy with these days, Father?" Shurgan greeted him honestly. Then he said with some excitement, "This is called a steam car. It's propelled by a steam engine and doesn't require human or animal labor to move. You won't get tired either." "How many kilograms of iron is this?" Shi Qing's first concern was how many kilograms of iron was used to make this steel monster. How many weapons could it make? How many soldiers could it equip? Although the output of Mount Damo's iron mine was 100 times higher than before, the price of Dayo's iron mine would drop in another 2 years. However, decades of experience had made Shi Qing unable to be immune to it. "About 2,000 kilograms, Shurgan whispered. Shi Qing was silent for a while before saying, "You guys are really generous. Sir Shi, iron will no longer restrict Dayo. Furthermore, these things are worth 20,000 kilograms of iron, let alone 2,000 kilograms. Just like the solar furnace, if one doesn't know how to use it, it won't be conspicuous at all. However, if it's used in the right place, it won't be exchanged even if it's worth 10 or 100 times more." Principal Ren. Shi Qing nodded his head and said, "I know, but it's an old idea that can't be changed in a short time. I still remember what Principal Ren said previously, but can this thing really do what Principal Ren said?" "This is just a prototype and it still needs to be improved," Ren Baqin replied. "I don't understand these things, so I'll wait and see your performance." Shi Qing smiled at Ren Baqin and returned to the Shi residence in a flash. After that, everyone carried the steam car back for inspection and found that the collision just now had created a hole in the cylinder, causing Du Laolu to receive a beating. "Teacher, how can this thing change direction?" Someone immediately asked Ren Baqin. "There's no need to change direction, just make it run on the steel rails." Ren Baqin then took out a few wooden sticks to demonstrate to everyone, and Shurgan immediately understood. In this case, the impact on the road will be reduced, and the speed can be increased significantly. Then he was speechless and asked, "But how much steel will be used?" "You don't have to worry about this. All you need to know is how useful this thing is. If it can set off from Lan City and reach the Yun Nation in 3 days, it will be worth it no matter how much steel is used." Understood. Everyone left excitedly after hearing Ren Baqin's words. When they personally made such a steamed car, everyone's enthusiasm was raised. They wanted to make the steam car that Yagüe had mentioned. After seeing them leave, Ren Baqin chuckled. Other than himself, no one knew how much steel was needed to build a railway. If they knew, they would probably be scared to death and try to stop his idea of building a railway. 1 meter of track required 100 kilograms of steel, and 1 kilometer required 100 tons of steel. At present, the annual output of Mount Damo's iron mine was 2 million kilograms, which was only 1,000 tons. It could be used to make weapons, and the steel produced in a year could be used to make 100,000 steel knives, which would double the number of soldiers in Dayo. With 200,000 iron hooves, it wasn't impossible to conquer Great Xia. However, it was impossible to build a railway. It was at least 1,000 kilometers from Lan City to the border of the Yun nation. According to the output of Mount Damo's iron mine, it could only lay 10 kilometers of track in a year. It would take more than 100 years to build such a railway. Fortunately, Rinpoche didn't set his sights on the output of Mount Damo's iron mine. Chapter 6:11. At the gate of Lan City, a group of 6 horsemen was stopped when they arrived at the gate. The 2 leaders of the horsemen were tall aborigines who looked to be in their 40s or 50s. Behind them were 2 young men in their 20s and 2 children in their teens. All of them were dressed in animal skins. As for their mounts, there were 2 mountain-gazing birds, 3 jumping goats, and a strange beast covered in black scales. Take these. Remember, if your mount poops on the ground, you have to clean it up. Otherwise, you will receive 10 lashes from the Public Order Bureau, a guard said as he threw 6 straw bags over. Since when was there such a rule? A tall middle-aged man at the front asked doubtfully. Her Majesty gave the order, and it will be like this in the future. The guard had been answering these questions every day for the past few days and was a little impatient. However, he was still kind-hearted and pointed to a few horsemen not far away. You can learn from them and save yourself some trouble. The few of them looked in the direction pointed out and saw a few people trying to hang the straw bags on the buttocks of their mounts. This way they wouldn't be like the fork-horned cow that would pull along the way. Secondly, they wouldn't notice it. After all, no one could keep an eye on the buttocks of their mounts all the way. Thank you for the reminder. The middle-aged man cupped his fists and smiled. Also, the guard carefully sized up the strange beast and warned, you are not allowed to dig holes in the city. After a while they set off again. The strange beast looked aggrieved. After running around naked for its entire life, it suddenly felt uncomfortable with a cloth bag hanging on its buttocks. Third uncle, this is Lan City. There are so many people. The young man and woman at the back of the group looked at the pedestrians on the streets and said excitedly, this is Lan City after all. Under the feet of Her Majesty. The middle-aged leader, who was addressed as third uncle, laughed. The clothes they are wearing are so beautiful. The young lady's gaze quickly fell on the clothes that the pedestrians were wearing. Although they were ordinary in the eyes of many, they were extremely tempting to a young lady who had just come out of the mountains. The middle-aged leader calculated in his mind and said dotingly, after we sell the things, we can buy half a roll of cloth. The young man and girl behind him were the most talented youngsters in the village. They had attained the earth wheel level before the age of 16 and were much more promising than their parents' generation. This time he brought this group of young men and women not only to buy New Year's goods, but also to find 2 old friends and see if they could participate in this year's lantern-grabbing contest. After walking forward for a while, the middle-aged leader revealed a puzzled expression. Why were all the cloth stores closed now? He got off his horse and asked around. Only then did he find out that due to the war this year the caravans were all gone, so naturally the cloth shops were closed. This made the girl feel slightly regretful. However, the children in the mountains were not so spoiled. They quickly focused their attention elsewhere. What a fragrant smell! The young girl said in surprise. It smells even better than roasted rock worms. Not only did she smell it, but the others also smelled it. Just the smell alone was enough to whet their appetites. The smell is coming from the front. Very quickly they found a shop that was tightly surrounded by people. Standing on their horses they could see a rack in front of the shop. A jumping lamb leg was being roasted on it. 2 skinny men who didn't look like aboriginals sprinkled some powder on the lamb leg every once in a while to make the aroma even more enticing. What's this for? Didn't you say that there are no more caravans? The middle-aged leader asked as he pulled one of the men. It's not a caravan. The man who was being pulled by the leader looked back at him, pointed to the signboard above the shop and asked, do you see the words on it? What's written on it? The middle-aged leader asked with a hint of respect. Although Deo respected martial arts, literate people were also looked up to. What's written on it? The man beside him asked softly. I heard from them yesterday that it seems to be the Imperial Family's spice shop? The other man asked uncertainly. The Imperial Family's spice shop. Her Majesty's spice shop. The man in front turned around and repeated. What's a spice? The middle-aged leader asked again. At the mention of this topic, the man immediately perked up and said, do you see the meat being roasted inside? Does the meat you roast smell so good? No. The middle-aged leader answered truthfully. That's it then. That's what spices do. When roasting meat, sprinkle some on it, and the aroma will immediately assail your nostrils. The taste will also make you want to swallow your tongue. The man seemed to be intoxicated as he spoke, as if he was reminiscing about the taste. How much is this spice? The middle-aged leader was a little tempted. I'm not sure, but it won't be cheap. The passerby looked at him and said, if you want to use it in the village, you might as well buy some salt. Then why are there so many people? The middle-aged leader felt strange. With so many people around, could it be that they were here to smell the aroma? After the lamb leg is roasted, it will be cut into thin slices and distributed to everyone. This is called tasting. Yes, tasting. So many people are waiting to taste a little, the passerby said after thinking for a while. That term wasn't easy to remember. This spice shop was naturally set up by Rinpoche. Of the spices that were originally planted, 2 batches of sesame and 1 batch of cumin had already been produced. Only the pepper had just matured recently. As for the pepper and Chinese anise, it would take another 2 years to harvest them. However, when the sesame and pepper ripened naturally, Rinpoche and the Empress were in Tianjin Basin. At this time, after the pepper ripened, they were taken out to be sold together. Besides the initial agreement with Tong Jinya to sell a portion to him, the rest of the spices were used for the palace, and the first spice shop was opened. Pepper and cumin weighed the same as silver. In other words, 1 tael of silver could only buy 1 tael of cumin or pepper, which was only slightly more expensive than salt. Back on Earth, spices were worth the same weight as gold, but the difference was too big. After all, they couldn't be sold abroad now. In Dayo, even the officials didn't make much money. If they were calculated according to the weight of gold like in ancient times on Earth, a large portion of these spices would have rotted in the warehouse. Initially, Rinpoche gathered about 1,000 mu of farmland. Among them, 200 mu of sesame, 200 mu of pepper and 200 mu of cumin. The rest was planted with Chinese anise and Chinese pepper. This year, they produced about 50,000 caddies of sesame, 100,000 caddies of pepper, and 40,000 caddies of cumin. This was a total of more than 100,000 taels of silver. 600 mu of farmland could produce such an amount of output, which could be said to be a windfall. It had to be said that this world was indeed a fertile land. Even without fertilizer or meticulous farming, they could still produce such an output. This was almost impossible on Earth. Half a day later, a few aborigines tasted the roasted mutton and almost swallowed their tongues. They braced themselves to ask about the price of the cumin and Chinese pepper before leaving while drooling. The leader had a rough idea. Although the price wasn't low, it wasn't impossible to buy 1 tael of each for the people in the village to try. I'm even hungrier, a young girl said with an aggrieved look. After eating such a piece of roasted mutton, her stomach was about to revolt. Bear with it. Let's go see an old friend and ask about your situation, the middle-aged man said. The middle-aged man said as he led them through Jinyang Avenue. After asking around, they arrived in front of a mansion and knocked on the door. A moment later they were welcomed in. You want to participate in the lantern-grabbing contest? This isn't impossible. You are indeed talented, but there are many talented youths in Lan City. I'm afraid you won't be able to stand out among them. Especially in terms of martial arts, the disciples of those big families are much stronger than what you have learned. If you want to find a way out, I have a chance. A middle-aged man in the hall chatted enthusiastically with the leader for a while. After hearing the purpose of their visit, he pondered for a while and said, "What do you mean?" The leader's eyes lit up. He didn't want this pair of youths to be buried in the village. Chapter 6:12. Black Bamboo Academy? What does that mean? The leader thought for a while and seemed to have heard of this name somewhere. Rinpoche, you must have heard of this person. The middle-aged man laughed. The husband chosen by Her Majesty? The leader suddenly realized why he felt that he had heard of this person before. He finally realized where he had heard of this person before. I heard that he's a gigolo. The young girl behind the leader opened her mouth curiously. Her Majesty is like the most beautiful star in the sky to her, and she's really curious about what kind of husband Her Majesty has chosen. Zhu Hua. The leader turned around and glared at her, causing her to shrink her neck. He's indeed a little pale. The middle-aged man agreed. However, don't say this outside as it might cause trouble if someone hears it. Also, don't underestimate him. Zhu, tell us more. You were the smartest person in the village back then. Later, you went to the Yun Nation and are now well-informed in Lan City. We can't compare to you in terms of what you know, the middle-aged man said. Zhu came out of the village more than 20 years ago. He was extremely intelligent at a young age and was even smarter than the village chief. However, his aptitude for martial arts wasn't considered good, and he was relatively thin and weak. After coming to Lan City, he didn't receive much attention and chose to travel to the Yun nation. It was precisely because he was relatively thin and weak that he looked more like a very strong person from the Yun nation. He had traveled in the Yun nation for quite a long time. After returning, he took up a position in the Ministry of Works. Now, he was already the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Works, a secondary class, 5th rank official. The middle-aged leader trusted Zhu's judgment. The village is ill-informed and there are some things that you don't know. However, what kind of person is Her Majesty? Why would she find a good-for-nothing husband? Zhu said faintly. Everyone deeply agreed with these words. Doubting Her Majesty's judgment? What kind of person was Her Majesty? Why did these people need to doubt her judgment? Although he isn't good at martial arts and has never learned martial arts as far as I know, he has extremely high attainments in other areas. Did you see the Imperial Spice store on your way here? Today the Ministry of Works is still promoting pumpkins, potatoes, sweet potatoes, and other crops that yield thousands of kilograms per mu. All of them were made by him. The few of them were expressionless. They lowered their heads and counted with their fingers, trying to figure out how much a few thousand caddies of land per mu was. This number was too big for them to comprehend. After counting his fingers and toes for a long time, the middle-aged man gasped. So many? Seeing their reactions, Zhu also smiled. That's right. When I first found out, I was also shocked. As far as I know, the highest yielding crops in the Yun nation and Great Xia are far inferior to this. Just this alone is enough to make his contributions. Apart from this, there is also a salt well. You should have heard of this. Dao also has a salt well now, and it was created by Principal Ren and his men. If we only talk about these two things, they are just great contributions to Dao and are not worth much attention. However, there was also the communication method that allowed people to communicate from thousands of kilometers away, the method of mining iron or the method of forging steel, and the various strange mechanical weapons used in the war with Great Xia. All of these were created by him. Recently he even pacified Tianjing Basin. Even the shaved ice, glass and mirrors in the city were made by him. Also, a few days ago he made a bet with the Jianghu family from the Yun nation. He won against them in dyeing, brewing and forging. You guys don't know much about the Jianghu family, but I have heard a little about them and know their capabilities. Rinpochen was able to win all 3 of the bets, which is already extremely astonishing. The few of them listened attentively. Even though they couldn't feel it in the village from what the person in front of them said, it seemed like Rinpochen had done a lot of amazing things. This person can be considered a genius, Zhu said at the end with a little admiration in his voice. He saw many things when he was traveling outside. Therefore he understood Rinpochen's value better than others and was more optimistic about him than Tong Jinya. This Black Bamboo Academy was established by him, and what is taught is what he has learned. Even though it doesn't talk about martial arts, it contains algebra and the way of nature. It's really amazing, Zhu exclaimed in admiration. Just by looking at how he has done so many things and brought about so many changes in just over a year, you can see how amazing his knowledge is. Even though they can't learn martial arts there, it's still an excellent way out. Even though it's a waste of the talents of these 2 children, martial arts doesn't mean everything, especially in the future. There haven't been any changes in the 70 years since the founding of Dao, but in the next few decades, as long as Rinpochen is still around, there will definitely be changes in Dao. The middle-aged leader was a little silent after listening. Zhu's words moved him a little. However, with the talents of these 2 children, he was unwilling to let them give up on learning martial arts. It was such a pity for their talents. At this moment, Rinpochen was strolling around the market. Recently, there were many aboriginals coming to Lan City to purchase things. At the same time, they also brought along a large number of mountain delicacies, such as many rare herbs and fruits, as well as some other rare treasures. For example, Rinpochen found a leather bag that was the size of a fist when shrunk, but could fit a person when expanded. It was said to be the stomach of some kind of strange beast. Rinpochen tried it and it was very sturdy. At least he couldn't tear it. One had to know that he had the strength of 1,300 kilograms, so he knew how much this bag could withstand. Such a bag only cost 30 taels of silver. Just now, he saw someone selling a type of baby monkey called Ting Ling. When it matured, it would be 30 to 40 centimeters tall and covered with short golden hair. Its movements were as fast as lightning and it had great strength. It was probably at the man-wheel level. If it was fated, it could even reach the earth wheel level. Furthermore, it could understand human language and was very intelligent. Most importantly, it had excellent hearing. After training, it could be used as a hunter's assistant. The price wasn't high, only 500 taels of silver. Rinpoche strolled around the market and bought a few novelty items before returning to the previous stall. He took a few gold ingots from the guard and threw them on the stall. There weren't any banknotes in Dayo. If he wanted to buy something expensive, he would have to carry a sack full of silver. Gold ingots were still more useful. This baby Tingling was only the size of a palm. It was covered with short brown hair and had a pair of eyes that looked like it came from a comic book. It looked extremely weird and its ears were also very large. Rinpoche took the rope that was tied to the baby from the hands of the aboriginals. The baby Tingling nimbly jumped onto Rinpoche's arm and looked at him eagerly. It grinned slightly and made chirping sounds. Little thing. Her Majesty might like it. Rinpoche stretched out his fingers and rubbed the head of the baby Tingling. Then the baby Tingling jumped onto his shoulder. Let's go back to the palace. Rinpoche held the rope with one hand and allowed the little thing to squat on his shoulder. He then called for the guards beside him to return to the palace. After returning to the palace, Rinpoche first went to Pingle Park to take a look. Two relatively dexterous palace maids were making Kongming lanterns. There was already a pile of finished products at the side. These were the lanterns that Rinpoche was going to light up tomorrow night. 666. Rinpoche felt that this number was quite auspicious. Then he saw two black and white lumps rolling around on the ground. Rinpoche immediately felt sad. Chapter 613. The Empress leaned on the couch with a wineglass in one hand and watched as Rinpoche went in and out busily. The Ting-Ting cub that Rinpoche had just bought was beside her with a wine pot on its head and claws. It looked pitiful and kept looking around with its round eyes. At this moment, Rinpoche not only brought over all the pots and pans from the imperial kitchen, but also beef, mutton, 2 fish and some fruits. The Empress didn't like to eat fish. Firstly, it didn't spit out bones. Secondly, she preferred to eat meat in big mouthfuls. However, Rinpoche loved to eat and would always make braised fish every 3 to 5 days. Nowadays, the imperial kitchen was pretty good at making it. According to Rinpoche, it could be compared to a 5-star chef. After all, the chefs in the imperial kitchen were originally talented in cooking. Their techniques and control of heat were also good. After Rinpoche's guidance, they improved extremely quickly. Rinpoche placed a chopping board on the stool, placed some beef on it and cut it into slices. He then turned to the Empress and asked, "Your Majesty, do you know how to chop the stuffing?" Meh. The Empress pointed at herself and found it funny. Chop the stuffing? Your Majesty's delicate hands can't be touched by cooking oil, but it's fun to do it occasionally. Let's eat dumplings tonight. Rinpoche wiped his hands with a piece of cloth. Or do you prefer to chop the stuffing or knead the dumplings? The Empress thought about it and actually didn't like either. However, seeing that he was in high spirits, she didn't want to dampen his spirits. She slowly walked over and took the kitchen knife from Rinpoche's hands. The hall was filled with a series of sounds of the knife chopping on the chopping board. Those sounds seemed to be connected together, and there was no gap in the Empress's knife. Rinpoche looked at it and exclaimed, "Your Majesty's knife technique is impenetrable. Even light can't shine through, let alone water." 30 seconds later, the Empress stuffed the knife into Rinpoche's hands and saw that the chopping board was full of meat stuffing. Rinpoche looked at the chopping board for a moment and couldn't help but say, "Your Majesty, this chopping board seems to be an inch thinner." "It's just a chopping board." The Empress disagreed. "That means that you have mixed the top layer of the chopping board with the sawdust and mixed it with the beef." Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Now we don't even need to add vegetables." The Empress stopped in her tracks and looked around. Then, as if she hadn't heard anything, she leaned on the couch and closed her eyes to rest. Rinpoche saw that even the Empress had learned how to play dead. It was better for him to do it himself. Sure enough, the Empress wasn't suitable for normal people. He asked someone to bring another chopping board and mince the meat again. When it was time to wrap the dumplings, he asked, "Your Majesty, do you not want to try making dumplings?" "I'm not trying. I want meat fillings. Only meat." The Empress picked up the wine pot from the head of the cub Ting-Ting, poured a cup of wine and placed the wine pot on its head. The cub Ting-Ting stood there obediently and didn't dare to move. Its expression became even more aggrieved. "I'm not a wine pot rack." "Are you sure it's edible?" Rinpoche squinted at her. I have the final say, the Empress said as she glanced at him. After working for 4 hours, Rinpoche's whole body was covered with white flour. The Empress curled up on the couch and watched as he busied himself. She wasn't in a hurry, and the corners of her mouth curled up from time to time. She quite liked this kind of scene. After a long time, Rinpoche came up with more than 10 plates of dumplings. Do they look different? The Empress asked. The color of the fillings inside the dumpling skin wasn't quite the same. This is the pure meat dumpling that your Majesty wanted. There's no vegetables at all. Rinpoche pushed half of the dumplings in front of the Empress. There were still 6 or 7 plates left in front of Rinpoche. The two of them sat on the table facing each other. The ting 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 was finally freed, but it didn't dare to run away. It stood obediently at the side and looked at Rinpoche with an expression that looked like it was waiting to be rescued from the abyss of suffering. 2 ounces of sorghum wine were poured into the dumplings, and the faint smell of dumplings mixed with the smell of wine. Deo doesn't seem to say Happy New Year? Rinpoche asked. Oh, Happy New Year then. Rinpoche chuckled. The Empress glanced at him and wanted to say, Happy New Year, but didn't say it out loud. She lowered her head and ate 3 dumplings. She started to frown. Dumplings tasted good and meat tasted good as well. However, pure meat dumplings didn't taste good. It was too greasy. She immediately pushed half of the plate in front of her over and said, Eat it. Rinpoche smiled slyly. He had suffered this before. What's inside? Pineapple? The Empress ate one of Rinpoche's dumplings. Her eyes widened and her face was full of vigor. Yes, pineapple, green mist grass and stone fish. Rinpoche gave his creativity a thumbs up. This is passion fruit and barbed turtle meat, and this is granny clam cloves. Rinpoche pointed at a few plates and explained to the Empress excitedly. He felt that with his craftsmanship and creativity, he would at least be able to get a place in a cooking competition. The combination of the sweetness of the fruit and the freshness of the fish and ghost meat had a strange appeal. Although the taste was a little strange, one would get used to it after eating it once. The Empress tasted every dish, silently took back her own plate, and pushed all of Rinpoche's plates back. Fortunately, there were fruits at the side. She ate 2 dumplings and 2 fruits so she could barely eat them. After eating the dumplings with difficulty, Rinpoche dragged the Empress out to release the Kongming lanterns. There were 666 Kongming lanterns, which were half the size of a human, placed everywhere in the courtyard. Can this fly to the sky? The Empress was a little doubtful. These lanterns were made of bamboo strips and covered with a layer of white cloth. Apart from this, there was only a small oil lamp underneath. Naturally. Do you have any wishes, Your Majesty? Write it on it and it will be brought to the place closest to the sky. Perhaps it will come true, Rinpoche asked as he took a stack of cloth, paper and pen. Whatever I want to do, I can naturally do it. If I can't do it, it's useless to write it on it. You might as well send Li Fu to the sky so that he doesn't have to worry about it every day. Even if I write, the country is prosperous and the people are at peace, is fine. It's always a wish. Rinpoche laughed. The Empress thought for a while and really wrote the words, the country is prosperous and the people are at peace, on the cloth that Rinpoche prepared. Then she got someone to tie it under the Kongming lanterns. Rinpoche also wrote, the 5 grains are abundant. The Empress thought for a while and wrote, the weather is favorable. Rinpoche, the fate of the nation is prosperous. Empress, the power of the nation is strong. Rinpoche, the union of 100 years. The Empress looked at him and thought for a long time. Finally she wrote the words, I miss you very much. Rinpoche then picked up a pen and wrote, give birth to a son soon. Blood rushed to the Empress's face. She kicked Rinpoche's leg and flew out in a circle. After a long time, Rinpoche limped back and ordered someone to light the Kongming lanterns. As the Kongming lanterns gradually rose into the sky, hundreds of lanterns of different heights slowly rose into the sky like a stairway to heaven. It was extremely beautiful in the night, like a beautiful painting. In the background was an endless galaxy that complemented each other. Won't it fall? The Empress suddenly thought. If the oil lamps fell, it would probably cause a fire. Your Majesty, even if it falls from the sky, the oil will be blown away. Naturally, nothing will happen. The Empress felt relieved and relaxed as she looked up at the beautiful scenery in the sky. As the night wind blew, the Kongming lanterns began to slowly float toward the south of the city. The lanterns in the night sky were naturally seen by countless people. Many places started to become noisy, and some people even came out of their rooms to look up at the night sky after hearing the news. Just like the fireworks last time, this time, It was also a breathtaking scene. It floated out of the palace. It must be Yagui's doing. Tong Lan stood in the courtyard and pouted but still admitted, "It's beautiful, but I don't know how he did it. I'll learn from him later." "What a clever idea," Tong Jinya said from the courtyard. In House Yunyan, many girls leaned against the window and looked at the sky outside enviously. Many of them thought how good it would be if they were the lanterns and could fly freely. In an inn. "Zhuohua, come out and take a look." A young man kicked open Zhuohua's door. "Bear cub, don't you know how to knock?" Zhuohua scolded. "So pretentious," the young man said in disdain. He then grabbed Zhuohua's hand and ran into the courtyard, pointing to the sky and saying, "Look. So beautiful." Zhuohua looked at the scene in the sky and her eyes immediately sparkled. "I heard that there were fireworks during Her Majesty's birthday celebration. It's a pity that I didn't get to see it," the young man said with some regret. In Jing Street, Li Fu reclined on the roof and looked at the scene in the sky. He left the wine glass on the roof and disappeared in a flash. After a while, he appeared in the sky and grabbed a Kongming lantern at the bottom. After seeing the structure, he revealed a contemplative look. In the Qin residence, Qin Xuan said loudly, "Bring me my bow. I want to see what it is." "Father," it flew out of the palace. A young man who looked similar to Qin Xuan reminded him. Qin Xuan looked at the Kongming lantern in the sky and was very curious. After thinking about it, at most he would be kicked by Her Majesty, so he said boldly, "It's okay, just bring me the bow." Not long after, Qin Xuan pulled the bow and arrow. With a sound of the bowstring, a lantern was instantly extinguished and the Kongming lantern also fell. "Sir, I picked it up. There are words on it." After a while, two servants rushed back with the Kongming lantern. "What's written?" "The two of us are illiterate." The two guards looked aggrieved. "Useless." Qin Xuan took the cloth and saw the words, "Have a son soon," written on it. Qin Xuan's expression immediately became interesting. This thing that flew out of the palace had these words on it. He didn't dare to think about it. "Father, what's written?" The young man from before came over to take a look and couldn't react for a long time. Then he said, "I don't know anything." Qin Xuan immediately scolded, "Nonsense, I just found out." After thinking about it, it was better not to let others know about this. Otherwise, Her Majesty would fly into a rage out of humiliation. The next day in the Shi residence, Shi Qing was surprised. "What? Have a son soon? Her Majesty and Rinpochen? Sir Qin, is this true? Why would I lie to you?" Qin Xuan's face was immediately filled with, "You actually suspect me? Why do you suspect me? When have I ever lied?" Chapter 6:14. 2 days later, when they went to court again, everyone's faces were full of spirit. Everyone exchanged glances. "Have you heard?" "You heard it too. Is it true?" "It shouldn't be false. Who would dare to talk about this? Besides, it was Mr. Qin who said it." Everyone turned to look at Qin Xuan again. "What are you looking at?" Qin Xuan's face darkened when everyone looked at him. He cursed in his heart. How did the news spread so fast? He mustn't let His Majesty know that he was the one who spread the news. Tong Jinya of the Ministry of Works, "You have an opinion?" Ministry of Revenue Wan sneered. "Lord Qin." The Minister of Justice squinted at him and asked, "What do you want to say?" The Minister of Rights raised his head and pointed his nose at Qin Xuan. The other officials glanced at Qin Xuan, then raised their heads to look at the sky. Although Qin Xuan was the Minister of War and was highly skilled, everyone present was a Cardinal Heaven expert. If they were to really fight, other than the Empress, Hongwu and Shiwanya, the rest of them might not necessarily be afraid of anyone. Qin Xuan cursed in his heart. This sentence was like poking a hornet's nest. If he continued to speak, he would probably be surrounded and kicked. He turned his head away from the crowd. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Haha. A sneer reached his ears. He didn't need to turn his head to know that it was Tong Jinya, that old man. After the Empress arrived, everyone looked at her strangely from time to time. What happened?" the Empress asked coldly. She felt that the atmosphere in the imperial court today was a little strange. "I'm fine. The country is prosperous and the people are at peace. Everything is great," Shi Qing said. "No one has anything to report?" the Empress asked again. "No." "Then why are you all looking at me?" Everyone lowered their heads to look for ants on the ground. "Raise your heads," the Empress said coldly. "What exactly happened? Or can't you tell me?" Your Majesty, it's really nothing, everyone said. What could possibly happen? For the past 2 days, rumors had been flying everywhere. Everyone was gossiping. However, could he tell the Empress about the contents of the gossip? What should he say about this? Since there's nothing else, all of you may leave, the Empress said. Your Majesty, Zhikohai spoke. The moment this junior elder, who had been well-behaved for the past year, spoke, everyone turned to look at him. Qin Xuan's heart was in his throat. Junior elder, please speak. Seeing that Zhikohai had spoken, the Empress's expression softened a little. I feel that since Principal Ren and Her Majesty haven't gotten married yet, it isn't appropriate for you to stay in the palace. Why don't you grant Principal Ren a temporary residence? Zhikohai suggested. What's wrong with it? The Empress asked. It's inappropriate. Zhikohai lowered his head. Where's the gift? The Aboriginals have never had such etiquette. Could it be that you are using the etiquette of Great Xia to request me? The Empress said coldly. Zhikohai broke out in a cold sweat when he heard this. I wouldn't dare. It was true that the Aboriginals did not forbid living together before marriage. However, Her Majesty was the current emperor, so it was easy for others to gossip about her. Seeing the Empress's attitude, everyone swallowed their words. Who are you to question my private affairs? If there's nothing else, all of you can leave, the Empress said impatiently. After everyone left, the Empress returned to her quarters and called Xenger over. Go and investigate. During the court session today, I saw that they were behaving strangely. Are they hiding something from me? The Empress said. Yes. Xenger immediately accepted the order and left. 4 hours later, Xenger returned again. After listening to her story, the Empress's face immediately turned black. No wonder everyone was behaving strangely today. No wonder Zhikohai said those words. Damn that Qin Xuan. Immediately, she appeared in the sky above the Ministry of War in a few flashes. Her cold voice that was filled with anger reverberated throughout half of Lan City like a clap of thunder. Qin Xuan, you ignorant old man, come out now. When Qin Xuan came out, the Empress didn't say a word and slapped him with her palm. The air rippled as if a huge transparent palm print had appeared. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, Qin Xuan broke into a run and asked, Your Majesty, what did I do wrong? How dare you run? The Empress was furious. She nailed Qin Xuan into the ground with one palm strike, pulled him out by his scalp and kicked him, collapsing 6 or 7 buildings in a row. Someone tie him up. The Empress said angrily. Your Majesty, what did Sir Qin do wrong? The officer from the Ministry of War quickly asked. Spreading rumors. The Empress's face was unsightly. When everyone heard this, they gave Qin Xuan a look of condolence. You've been exposed. Your Majesty, how do you want to punish Sir Qin? Tong Xinye rushed over from the Ministry of Works and asked softly. The Empress said hatefully, hang him on the palace gate. If the punishment was too heavy, Tong Xinye might have stopped her. However, after hearing this punishment, he immediately went to take pleasure in Qin Xuan's misfortune and personally tied him up. While tying him up, he said, Sir Qin, this mouth of yours serves you right. You even dare to talk about Her Majesty's private affairs. You are too daring. Who asked you to watch your mouth? Hang him on the city gate for 3 to 5 days, 10 to 15 days and wake up. Qin Xuan glared at Tong Xinye with a bloody nose and swollen face. The Empress's face turned black again. Just now she said that Qin Xuan spread rumors, but when it came to Tong Xinye, it became his private affairs. Those who didn't know better would think that what Qin Xuan said was true, and she flew into a rage out of humiliation. After kicking Qin Xuan to the wall, the Empress said fiercely, Someone hang Qin Xuan on the palace gate. No one is allowed to let him down unless I say so. After finishing her sentence, she stomped her feet and disappeared. She still felt angry when she returned to the palace. No matter who it was, they wouldn't be in a good mood after being criticized for no reason. Furthermore, Qin Xuan was a blabbermouth that spread everywhere. Not long after, Renbaqian returned to the palace after school. He saw Qin Xuan hanging on the city gate with Tong Xinye and a few people from the Ministry of Works watching. He immediately laughed and asked, How did Sir Qin anger Her Majesty this time? Tong Xinye looked at Renbaqian strangely and said, Sir Qin's behavior has something to do with Sir Ren. Renbaqian immediately felt strange and asked, What does it have to do with me? Tong Xinye smiled ambiguously and said, Sir Qin spread the matter between you and Her Majesty everywhere, which angered Her Majesty. After all, it's between you and Her Majesty. Do you think it has anything to do with you? Rinpoche felt even more strange. The matter between him and Her Majesty had been spread for a year. What else could it be? Tang Jinya immediately made a gesture. Have a son soon. Rinpoche heard this and laughed mischievously. Soon after, he realized that something was amiss. How did Qinchuan know? What did he spread to the outside world? After thinking it through, Rinpoche immediately spat and said, "Serves him right." Tang Jinya deeply agreed with him. Rinpoche didn't even look at Qinchuan and entered the palace. When he returned and saw the Empress, he acted as if he didn't know anything. This was to prevent the Empress from venting her anger on him. When the Empress saw that Rinpoche acted as if nothing had happened, she became even angrier, but it couldn't be seen on her face. After lunch, the Empress said, "I will give you an hour to rest. Today's training will be doubled." Rinpoche was dumbfounded and asked, "Your Majesty?" Chapter 6:15. A few days after the new year, a group of hundreds of carriages and horses arrived at Lan City under the escort of soldiers. From afar they saw Zhang Junjing and a few others waiting at the city gate. This group of people were mostly burly men, ranging in age from 17 to 70 years old. All of them looked tired. Although they had arrived at their destination, they didn't look excited. Instead they felt uneasy. "Second uncle, it must have been hard on you for the long journey." Zhang Junjing brought Zhang Hichi and Zhang Heju to greet them. A white-haired, exhausted old man came down from the carriage. This group of people were the craftsmen of the Zhang family. Many of them were well-known figures in the manufacturing industry. After Zhang Junjing lost the bet, they received the letter and discussed it before heading to Lan City. After traveling through many places, they finally arrived after a month. The old man didn't answer. He first looked up at Lan City, which was close at hand, and then said, "Let's talk after entering the city." He turned to a burly man riding on a fork-horned cow and said, "Thank you for escorting us all the way. Someone bring the things here." As he spoke, someone brought over a plate of silver ingots. "Thank you for your hard work these days. This is a small token of my appreciation. Please have a drink." The old man smiled. The burly man looked at the plate of silver ingots and waved his hand to let someone take it. "It was the Protector General who ordered us to escort you. Otherwise, I'm afraid you wouldn't have reached Lan City." After saying that, he ignored the group of people and left with them. After a while, Zhang Junjing brought everyone to a house that had been prepared beforehand. Then the old man brought 6 or 7 people to sit with Zhang Junjing in a house. "I have already read the letter. Tell me more in detail," the old man said. Then Zhang Junjing explained the details of the bet. After that, he carefully took out a heavy box from the cabinet and placed it on the table. After opening it, there were torsion springs of various sizes inside. "Second uncle, look. This is what he made." A few people beside the old man couldn't help but take out the torsion springs and examine them carefully. The old man observed for a long time before sighing. "Amazing. I didn't expect someone to do this better than thousands of craftsmen of the Zhang family. Since we have lost the bet, we have to be willing to accept the loss. The Zhang family will work for this person. However, this matter involves the safety of thousands of our Zhang family members. In your opinion, what do you think of this person?" Zhang Junjing pondered for a moment before he slowly said, "Although he looks ordinary, there's a universe in his stomach. Your evaluation is not low. This person looks ordinary and doesn't stand out at all. However, his methods were indeed very vicious." Putting everything else aside, just the title of Poison Warrior alone was exchanged for countless lives. Furthermore, they were also very proficient in manufacturing machinery. Last year, when Great Xia attacked, if it weren't for those extremely powerful machinery, Great Xia wouldn't have been defeated so quickly. With the addition of the Yin Nation, the situation might have been completely reversed. Uncle already knows about forging, dyeing, and brewing. He even founded Black Bamboo Academy to impart algebra and other knowledge. "I already know that. He is indeed an extraordinary person." The old man nodded. "You know what this old man wants to know? The lives of so many people in the Zhang family are all on him. He can't be careless. There's something second uncle doesn't know. Last year, he made a trip to Tianjin Basin and returned with thousands of immigrants from the Hao Nation. The Imperial Glass Shop and Spice Shop that he runs have these immigrants working there. In addition, there are also a few in the Imperial Beast Garden and the Palace. I once inquired with those Hao Nation immigrants, but the information I obtained was very limited. From his actions, it seems that he wants these Hao Nation immigrants to live together with the Aboriginals." It seems that he prefers to use people who aren't aboriginals. After all, he isn't an aboriginal, the old man said. As for his temperament, he doesn't seem like a cold-blooded person. However, the most important thing is whether our Jiang family is valuable or not. Second uncle still needs to see for himself, Zhang Junjing said. We have to meet him since he is here. Make the arrangements, the old man said. In fact, Rinpoche already knew of their arrival before they entered the city. He received the visiting card the next day and met them in a tea house. In addition to Zhang Junjing, his second uncle Zhang Zishan, and several old craftsmen from the Jiang family were there. Seeing that Rinpoche was so young, even though everyone already knew about him, they still had doubts in their hearts. How could someone so old learn so many things? Principal Rin, I'm Zhang Zishan. This is the first time we've met, and we're here to discuss the Jiang family's matters. Zhang Zishan stood up to welcome Rinpoche. Rinpoche nodded and sat opposite everyone. I'm a boorish man who doesn't know much and can't speak. I just want to know how Principal Ren intends to settle the Jiang family. What can you give us? Zhang Zishan went straight to the point and placed himself in a lower position. Rinpoche laughed, looked at them and said, Isn't it too late for you to ask about a bet and a loss? After Rinpoche finished speaking, their faces immediately changed. Zhang Zishan's expression changed and he said, Principal Ren, you misunderstood. The Jiang family isn't bargaining, but we want to know how we will be settled. After all, this concerns the lives of thousands of people in the Jiang family. There are many opinions in the Jiang family, and we just hope that Principal Ren can make it clear so that we have some ideas. Senior, you're not a boorish man. Rinpoche laughed. Dayo lacks everything including talent and ordinary skills. You will naturally have a place to use your skills here. Whatever the Jiang family knows, you have to bring over and develop this industry. However, Dayo isn't the Yun Nation and I can't bring over the Yun Nation's methods. It's impossible to control all aspects because the best things are in my head. The specific method is that there must be a certain number of aboriginals participating in every industry, and both sides will contribute money and effort. The aboriginals will need to account for 70 to 90% of the industry. It doesn't seem like much, but if it goes any higher, I'm afraid that people will be jealous. Furthermore, this is an entire nation and only our two sides are doing it. What does this represent? This is a monopoly of a certain industry in a country. Of course, this will slowly be liberalized in the future, but that's a matter for the future. If we do this, I'm afraid that the Jiang family will be swallowed alive in a few years, Zhang Zishan said in a deep voice. The others didn't look too good either. According to Rinpoche, it was equivalent to the Jiang family handing over all their skills and owning a small portion of each industry. After a few years, when these industries developed in Dayo and the aboriginals thoroughly grasped them, the Jiang family would really have nothing to do with it. I said before that the best things are in my head and not in your hands. Don't think too highly of yourself, Rinpoche said unhurriedly. In fact, he understood the Jiang family's concerns, but his words weren't forgiving at all. Chapter 6:16. Weaving? Water conservancy? Planting? Processing? Even if it's farming equipment, what do you have to show me? Rinpoche thought for a while and said to Shirhu, Go to my room and bring me the brown wooden box under my bed. Shirhu then left in a hurry. After that, the room fell into silence. Rinpoche calmly waited there. It would be a waste of his breath to speak now, and these people wouldn't shed tears until they saw their coffins. The Jiang family was pondering what Rinpoche had asked the guard to bring. An hour later, Shirhu hurried back with a wooden box that was 2 feet long, 1 foot wide and half a foot thick. Sir, I have brought it. Rinpoche took the box and opened it. He rummaged through it and threw out a blueprint. A water-powered textile machine that uses water to spin cloth. Take a look and see if you can understand it. This is a water-powered forging machine that is also driven by water. It can save a lot of manpower when used for forging. This is a pulley composite bow. A strong bow with 100 kilograms of force can be drawn with 20 kilograms of force. I don't need to explain its function. As soon as Rinpoche finished speaking, the person who was still studying the blueprint immediately snatched the composite bow blueprint from his hand. After looking at it for a while, everyone started to be surprised. So that's how it is. Using pulleys here can reduce the force. In fact, this world had already discovered the function of pulleys. This simple physics was something that everyone knew in any world, but the problem was understanding it. See, I'm not afraid of you seeing these things, and I'm not even afraid of you studying them, because I know far more than you think. What you think is only important in your eyes. These few things that I have brought out are already more advanced than what you know, but these are only simple and easy to make. In fact, I can make better ones, but it will take some effort. I use you not because of the things you can bring over, but because you can save me time. I have too many things to do and don't have the energy to focus on everything. Therefore, I need some smarter people to help me with some things. You are the smarter people in my eyes, Rinpoche said slowly. After a long time, Zhang Zishan put down the blueprints and looked at Rinpoche with a serious expression. In addition to the winemaking, springs, and dyeing, Rinpoche had indeed shown that he was stronger than the Jiang family in many aspects. One had to admit that there were indeed people in this world who were born with knowledge. When he was at this age, he was already somewhat famous in the Jiang family, but he was still only talented in one aspect. A sense of powerlessness welled up in his heart. There was really no comparison between people. Compared to him, he could be said to have lived his life like a dog for the past few decades. Sir Ren, you are indeed amazing. You are stronger than thousands of people in our Jiang family. But you still haven't told me how to make me believe that you won't burn the bridge after crossing it. What's in it for me to burn the bridge after crossing it? Rinpoche laughed. I don't care about your technology. I don't care about money. If it weren't for the war, just by selling those mirrors to the Yin nation in Great Xia, I would be able to earn a lot of money. Rinpoche casually took out a palm-sized object and placed it on the table. There were 2 glass funnels at the top and bottom, and the sand on one side was constantly flowing down to the other side. This is an hourglass. It can be used to measure time. It takes exactly 2 hours for the sand to flow from one side to the other. How much do you think this thing is worth? 600 taels of silver. Zhang Zishan and the rest carefully stared at the transparent hourglass that Rinpoche took out and guessed. Although this hourglass looked a little crude to Rinpoche, to the Jiang family, it was already extremely exquisite. They believed that such a small object would definitely have a lot of rich people willing to spend a few hundred taels of silver to buy it. There are people willing to buy it for 1,000 taels of silver. I'm taking this to show you that any small object I take out has great commercial value. If I want money, I can get it at my fingertips. You guys can help me save some time. What's in it for me to kill you guys? I can even tolerate the Jing tribe, so why can't I tolerate you guys? As long as you know your place, naturally no one will touch you. I can also recommend you guys to the Ministry of Works. You should know about the Jing tribe, right? Rinpoche looked at Zhang Junjing. What I want is for the Jing tribe and the aboriginals to live under the same sky. Therefore, I will gradually raise the status of the Jing tribe, and you guys can receive the same treatment as the Jing tribe. Sir Rin is from the Jing tribe? Zhang Zishan asked. In your eyes, I'm just a family. Don't use your thoughts to guess what I'm thinking. Rinpoche shook his head. His words were full of condescension. I'm looking at the future of this world. The Jiang family indeed didn't know what Rinpoche was thinking, but his tone made them feel as if he was standing in the clouds and looking down at them. He was simply an arrogant lunatic. Did he think he was a god? Your Jiang family has already sent over the name list, yet you're asking about this now. You don't dare to advance or retreat, and you're in a dilemma. This isn't the demeanor of a family that has been passed down for hundreds of years, Rinpoche said with a smile. Zhang Zishan didn't look good even though what Rinpoche said was true. However, he really couldn't do anything about it. After all, the lives of the thousands of people in the Jiang family were at stake and he had to be careful. Even now, the Jiang family was still quarreling incessantly. I'll give you another promise. The Jiang family can choose one industry or technology as its core and establish itself. Rinpoche smiled. Sure enough, as soon as he said this, everyone in the Jiang family showed a trace of joy. Rinpoche sighed in his heart. The thinking of the people in this era was limited, and no matter what family it was inevitable. They didn't think about the industry they chose. If they mastered more advanced technology, the entire Jiang family could collapse at any time. In fact, the Jiang family might have understood this, but they still chose to do so. They needed to hold on to something tightly, as if this would make them feel that their lives were in their hands. Sir Rin, there's no need for this, Zhang Junjing suddenly said. Everyone in the Jiang family immediately turned their heads and glared at him, looking puzzled. Junjing, since when can you make decisions for the Jiang family? Zhang Zishan shouted. Second uncle, I'll tell you later. Zhang Junjing shook his head slightly and cupped his hands toward Rinpoche. Sir Rin, this time we're petty? The Jiang family is willing to believe in your sincerity. With your status, you naturally wouldn't lie to us. I only hope that you'll be generous with your teachings in the future. Rinpoche smiled. There was finally someone in the Jiang family who understood. The Jiang family can look for me after you've thought it through. Seeing that the others were still puzzled, Rinpoche got up and left with his guards. After Rinpoche left, the Jiang family had a dispute in the restaurant. In the end, Zhang Junjing still managed to convince everyone. The next day he found Rinpoche, and the Jiang family completely submitted to him. Of course they were nominally under the Empress. Since then Rinpoche had a large number of skilled craftsmen under him. The first thing Rinpoche did after the Zhang family submitted to him was to mobilize some Baihu from Tianjin Basin and head to the Yun Nation with his subordinates. With the power that the Zhang family had developed in the Yun Nation for hundreds of years as spies, these Baihu could easily infiltrate the major cities of the Yun Nation. Chapter 617. The Zhang family had pledged allegiance to Rinpoche, and everyone wanted to learn something from him. After all, Rinpoche had proven that he could completely crush the Zhang family in many aspects of technology. Those things that the Zhang family had were nothing in his eyes. Even though the Zhang family had such intentions, the blueprint that Rinpoche gave them still gave them a fright. They didn't have the time to ponder whether it was a good or bad thing to tie the lives of thousands of Zhang family members to Rinpoche. This is the blueprint of the clock tower. There are 3 hands of different lengths on the clock dial, which are the hour hand, minute hand, and second hand. This clock dial divides the day into 24 hours, and each hour is divided into 2.5 hours. When the minute hand moves 1 round, the hour hand will move 1.5 hours. 2 rounds will be 2 hours. When the second hand moves 1 round, the minute hand will move 1 small space. It seems to have the same function as a sundial. More than a dozen people from the Zhang family gathered in a circle and looked at the blueprint in the middle. This world mainly used a sundial to measure time. It was a piece of equipment that used the shadow of the sun to measure time. However, sundial was affected by day and night as well as the change of seasons. Therefore its accuracy wasn't high. It's completely driven by machinery and is much more accurate than a sundial. The error is within 5 minutes every day. In theory it can achieve an even smaller error, Rinpoche said faintly as he sat in his school office with his feet on the table. The most important thing is that this clock tower isn't limited by time and can be seen regardless of day or night. Moreover, it's simple and clear. It's perfect for measuring time, Rinpoche said. If that's the case, it's much more convenient than a sundial. However, the structure is 100 or even 1,000 times more complicated. How is this made? What's the use of this mechanism? Why is there a lock here? Soon, everyone couldn't be bothered with Rinpoche anymore as they discussed in low voices. It's written here as an escape mechanism. As the name suggests, it's an escape mechanism. We have to see how it is made. Never heard of it. What's the one below? Most of the people from the Zhang family who came this time were craftsmen, and they were very enthusiastic about this new thing. This is the most important structure of the clock tower. We already have all the blueprints, so it shouldn't be difficult for us to deduce what we don't understand. I hope you can figure it out as soon as possible. This clock tower is more than 60 meters tall and will become a landmark in Lan City. Everyone who comes to Lan City will see this clock tower as soon as they see it. The name of the Zhang family will also be known and remembered by everyone. After hearing what Rinpoche said, they were even more enthusiastic. Not many people can resist the temptation of leaving their names in history. You have to study it and shrink it to the size of a human head or even smaller, Rinpoche continued. We will try our best. Zhang Junjing cupped his fists. I always thought that your Zhang clan had the best craftsmen. As long as someone can do it, we can definitely do it too. Zhang Zishan said decisively. I like your confidence. If you need any manpower or materials, just let me know. I just hope to see the goods as soon as possible. Rinpoche laughed. Zhang Zishan's words made him a little fond of the Zhang family. Sir Rin, please find a quiet residence for us. Hundreds of people can't even sleep well in that courtyard, Zhang Zishan immediately said. I have neglected this matter. I will get someone to arrange it for you in a while. Let's stay at Jing Street, which is adjacent to the Jing tribe. You will be more comfortable there, Rinpoche said after some thought. Thank you. The Zhang family didn't have any objections to living in Jing Street. After all, they were surrounded by Jing tribe people who looked the same. Compared to the fierce-looking aboriginals, it was much better. Moreover, it wouldn't be easy for others to find trouble with them. After the Zhang family left, Rinpoche returned to the palace to see the Empress. As soon as he opened his mouth to greet her, she stretched out her finger and shot a grape-sized fruit into his throat. "This time, the purplish-green fruit is very sweet," the Empress said with satisfaction. Cough cough, cough cough, cough 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 cough. Rinpoche felt like he was suffocating. That grape was directly stuck in his windpipe. Seeing that his situation wasn't good, the Empress flashed and slapped his back. The grape was spat out again, hit the ground and bounced up to hit Qing Yuan in the eye. Ouch. Qing Yuan was also shocked. Cough cough, Your Majesty, this purplish-green fruit of yours is indeed not something that ordinary people can enjoy. Rinpoche's face turned red. When he finally calmed down, he looked at the fruit on the plate held by Lisan's cub, Golden Retriever, and felt guilty. He had almost choked to death by such an inconspicuous fruit just now. A few days ago, the Empress gave Lisan's cub a few names. They were Dove, Ferrero, and Erguoto. Rinpoche also gave it a name, Jingang, and finally made a compromise with Golden Retriever. Ungrateful. The Empress snorted softly and floated back to the couch, ignoring him. Rinpoche stood in place and touched his neck before stepping forward and saying, "Your Majesty, I have just given the clock tower blueprint to the Jianghu family. When the time comes, we will be able to build a lighthouse in the center of Lan City that everyone can see when they look up." The Empress had always been interested in such topics. She quickly forgot that she almost tortured Rinpoche to death with a fruit and began to excitedly discuss where to build the lighthouse. The Empress's idea was to build it in the square in front of the palace, but Rinpoche felt that it wasn't appropriate. The lighthouse in the plan was about 60 meters tall, and it could be said to have a panoramic view of the palace from there. It wasn't suitable to be too close to the palace. The Empress thought about it and felt that what Rinpoche said made sense. The two of them took out the blueprint of Lan City and compared it for the whole afternoon. At first, they planned to tear down a small area near Jianghu Street and make a turntable square with the lighthouse in the middle. At the same time, they would make that place the center of Lan City. In the end, they considered that whether it was mobilizing the winged cavalry or activities like the Great Hunt, they would set off in front of the palace. Such a turntable square would affect the roads, so they finally changed it to a location between Beihong District and Julian District. After deciding on the location, Rinpoche began to think about the feasibility of speculating on the land nearby. As an earthling, he subconsciously felt that the value of the land would definitely rise. However, after thinking about it carefully, he gave up on this idea. Most of his actions were on behalf of the Empress, and it wasn't a good thing for the imperial family to compete with the commoners in this aspect. Furthermore, Rinpoche and the Empress had a more ambitious idea. After conquering the Yun nation, they would build a modern new city next to Lan City. It would be a new city that was more complete in terms of drainage, pipes, electric wires, layout, public facilities, and toilets. Even though Lan City was the imperial capital, there were too many disadvantages in this era. Just the fact that people could urinate and defecate anywhere was enough to give people a headache. From Great Elder Shi Qing to the peddlers and pawns, no one cared about this matter. Even though they had recently begun to control this aspect, especially the matter of the mounts excreting in the city, it was still difficult to stop. On one hand, no one cared about it, so it was naturally difficult to implement. On the other hand, especially in Lan City, there wasn't even a single public toilet on a few streets. How could people suffocate to death? Therefore, the value of the Yun nation was great. The Yun nation contained too much of Rinpoche and the Empress's expectations. Chapter 618. Qing Lian sat lazily on the branch and opened the letter in her hand. A line of words came into her eyes. "Do you want fame, wealth, and status? Do you want to know the mysteries of this world? If you want, I can give them to you. Go and find them. I've put everything there." How arrogant. Qing Lian snorted coldly, then continued to read the entire content. She gently swung the branch, carefully folded the letter into a paper airplane, and threw it into the distance. A person jumped up from under the tree and caught the paper airplane in his hand. "Your habit of throwing things around is not good. How about it? What do you think? You're either an egomaniac or a big liar." Qing Lian said disdainfully. "I know you've suffered a little, but don't let this blind you," Su Qing said with a smile under the tree. Hearing this, Qing Lian's face immediately turned livid. At that time, she just wanted to watch a good show, but she didn't expect that kind of encounter. If she could do it all over again, she would choose to leave the imperial capital far away and never stay for a moment. "Sword, come." Qing Lian shouted softly, and a green light descended from the sky. Then, like a flying immortal, it stabbed toward Su Qing from head to toe. You can't blame me for this. Forget it, I won't mention it in the future. Su Qing quickly dodged, only to see that there was a bottomless hole where he was originally. If you mention it again, don't blame me for opening a hole above and below for you. Qing Lian sneered. Su Qing's face was serious. I always feel that you seem to have said something extraordinary. Get lost. But you'd better not underestimate him. This person is not simple and I can't figure him out. Su Qing changed the topic again. He said those words at Qi Zixiao's birthday celebration. It's been almost 3 months now and he suddenly showed it to me. What exactly is his intention? Aren't you interested? Su Qing raised the letter in his hand with a surprised look. Qing Lian obviously liked to join in on the fun. It was said that there was a treasure map left behind by a master. She chased after it for 2 years and fought several bloody battles before she finally snatched the underwear left behind by that master. 1,200 pieces, do you think I'm a fool? Only a fool would look for it. It's impossible to gather them all, Qing Lian said disdainfully. Cough cough. Su Qing coughed awkwardly. You sent someone to look for him? Qing Lian re-examined Su Qing. She didn't realize that he was so stupid before. You don't have to gather 1,200 pieces to find the address. What do you want me to do? You look like you're constipated, Qing Lian said with a frown. I want you to go to Lan City and look for someone. Su Qing finally said something. Oh, Qing Lian asked. Ning Kaichen is a sword master just like you. The spiritual sword in his hand is called Green Pearl, and his strength is equivalent to the Earth Embryo realm. Ning Kaichen and is a Qing, and is Ning. Some of the things in his hands are things that we must obtain. Su Qing took out a portrait from his bosom. It was a portrait of a delicate and pretty scholar. In addition, tell Deyo that the new emperor has already ascended to the throne and has recruited 400,000 new soldiers to fill the various regions. Also, transfer the veteran soldiers from the various cities to the border. At the same time, tell Deyo that the new emperor has ascended to the throne and recruited 400,000 new soldiers. Together with the remaining 180,000 soldiers in Chesua Pass, we have another 500,000 soldiers. This is also the final strength of Great Xia. This will be the last glory of Great Xia. Su Qing looked at the sky. In other words, your plan is about to begin? Qing Lian asked with interest. Yes. It's faster than I expected. Qing Lian stretched. Her white clothes clung to her body and outlined her beautiful curves. It's also faster than I expected. Fortunately, I was sent to Tianjing Basin this time and happened to be in contact with Renbaqian. That's why Emperor Xia died so early and why we can progress so quickly, Su Qing said. Renbaqian. Qing Lian's eyes flickered. Don't get any ideas and ruin the big plan. Qi Zixiao isn't someone to be trifled with. Even Ting Yu died in her hands, Su Qing warned. Qi Zixiao wasn't Ting Yu's match. Ting Yu was too arrogant, Qing Lian said. Although she didn't see the situation at that time, she could guess what happened. Ting Yu is cunning and unscrupulous. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be easy to deal with, but he didn't cause much damage to the aboriginals before his death. She naturally didn't expect that Ting Yu didn't even know where his spear went before his death. Otherwise it might have caused some trouble. I'll pack up and set off tomorrow, Qing Lian said. She turned around, and an inexplicable glint appeared in her eyes again. Renbaqian? It was better to offend a villain than a woman. As soon as Renbaqian came out of Jing Street, he heard a delicate voice from the roadside. Sir Ren, do you want to come over? This voice gave Renbaqian the impression that it was saying, Sir, come and play. In particular, that delicate voice was full of charm and charm. Most people wouldn't be indifferent to it. Renbaqian turned his head and saw a seductive woman leaning against the door of a shop and smiling at him. The woman was dressed in purple. Her hair was tied up at the back and the hair on the sides and side of her face was loose, covering half of her face. The area around her eyes was painted pink, making her look long and charming. Her red lips were like a raging fire that could burn into one's heart. Ning Kaichen. Renbaqian looked at her. He hadn't seen her for 2 months and she had become even more enchanting. He looked at the sign of the shop that Ning Kaichen was leaning against. There were 2 words on it, home, and a big wine beside it. Ning Kaichen opened this wine shop after living in seclusion in Jing Street for 2 months. With her strength, those who could beat her wouldn't care about her. Ordinary people couldn't beat her, so there wouldn't be any trouble. Coupled with her enchanting appearance, most people wouldn't find trouble with her. Not only that, but her wine shop's business was also good. It was said that many children of officials often visited her recently. For example, Shi Wanya's son. For example, Du Changkong. The thoughts of these people were self-evident. However, he didn't know what these people would think if they knew his true identity. With these thoughts in mind, Ren got down from his mount and strode in with his guards. It's rare for Sir Ren to visit me, so I might want to stay for a while. Sir Ren, please wait for a moment. I'll go and cook 2 side dishes. Ning Caichen's voice was soft and charming, and her eyes were almost dripping water. Shi Hu and the others who were behind Ren clearly knew his identity, but they still couldn't help but feel thirsty. Going after knowing the man. Should I go after him or not? The scales in their hearts swayed up and down as they stared fixedly at Ning Caichen. Cough, just sit for a while. There's no need to trouble yourself. Ren Baqian's cough finally woke everyone up. If he didn't wake them up, Shi Hu was afraid that he would be drooling. Even after being woken up by Ren Baqian, their hearts were still swaying. Finally, they turned their heads to the side with a look of regret. If it was a woman, they would snatch her back even if their legs were broken. Unfortunately, it was a man. Even so, they still wanted to go after knowing the man. You seem to be in good condition. Ren Baqian looked around and said. The wine shop wasn't big and there were 6 tables downstairs. There were flowers everywhere and it was obvious that they were changed every day. I'm alone and drifting like duckweed. What can I do even if I look fresh? Ning Caichen said faintly. Ren Baqian didn't dare to answer and pretended not to hear her. If Sir Ren has nothing to do, you might as well come and visit me. After all, we are old friends and can talk to me, Ning Caichen said. I'm busy. Ren Baqian shook his head and said, I'm so busy every day that I haven't had any free time in a long time. If Sir Ren has any troubles, you might as well tell me. I might be able to help, Ning Caichen said softly. At this moment, she slowed down her voice, which was soft and gentle, as if it was brushing against the tip of one's heart. Ren Baqian thought to himself that she was formidable. If one didn't know her roots, he was afraid that not many people would be able to resist her. After Ning Caichen's temperament changed, she was even more of a woman than a woman. After sitting in Ning Caichen's wine shop for 30 minutes, Ren Baqian left with his men. After coming out, Shi Hu couldn't help but smack his lips and say, Oh my, this guy. I want to tie him up and bring him back to get married. Ren Baqian turned his head and looked at Shi Hu with disgust. With a face full of resentment he said, I didn't expect you to be like this, Shi Hu. Stay away from me. He is much more seductive than the women in the village. Shi Hu thought about it and felt conflicted. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.